Hey, we're back live. It is going to be the after show for the Destiny and former atheist turned pastor Jeff Grupp. I'm still getting people in here. I didn't want to take too long between the ending of the non sequitur to start the after show. Just enough to go use the facilities and maybe grab a bite to eat. But I have got the link out to a lot of people. People have asked me to join, and then they're not joining. But of course, we know how that works. Usually, they're going to be coming in afterwards. But I did kind of want to touch on some of the things in the discussion. About what I've noticed as far as Jeff's justificatory reasons for why he holds a particular position and what it actually means to have beliefs. So anyways, let's get this party started. If you want to join, message me. I will give you the link to join. Message me on G+, on email, steveaskanything@gmail.com, or on Twitter DM or Facebook. Let me know if you guys can hear me just fine in the live chat. And if you guys want in from the live chat, please, Manifold, you want in, message me either on Twitter, actually send me an email would be better, but if you just have Twitter, that's fine too. But this is my email. Anybody's welcome to come in and talk about this particular, I wouldn't even call it a debate, right? Because I'm really not sure what was really debatable on this particular discussion. I know Kyle labeled it a debate, and I think that was kind of probably the wrong way to go. This was much more of a discussion than a debate, and trying to suss out Jeff's reasoning by which he converted from atheism to theism. And that's not really something that's debatable, right? It's questionable about why you form a particular belief, but there's not really a debate to be had. And by the way, thank you so very much, Thomas, for coming in at last minute and filling in for that. And now he just took off, but it's okay. Thomas? I also got Brian in here. He's AFK for a few minutes too. But anyways, I do really want to dive into whether you guys think that Jeff really had a reason to believe what he believed. And I'm not going to go into the specifics of, is somebody ever justified or not justified to believe in God? I believe that firmly that you are justified to believe in God given certain reasonings, right? I think that it is just like any other position. We have reasons why we believe. Doesn't necessarily mean it's an ontological reality. I believe that there are intelligent life out there in the universe. I have no ontological facts to support that whatsoever. I have mathematical facts, which would be like the Drake equation, but there are reasons why people believe. But I don't know if he met his own epistemic burden of justification. I don't know how he formulated the conclusion that what he experienced somehow led him to whatever denomination of Christianity that he fell into, which I think he mentioned Calvinism. But I want to get your guys' impression on it. Do you think that he was justified to hold his particular position? Thomas, again, you missed it. I said thank you very much for joining as a co-host. I know it's last minute, and I really appreciated it. You did a great job. So what did you think? Was it a debate? Because I don't see what was debatable on. I think it was just a discussion. And poor Destiny seemed like he was kind of bored, and I felt bad, but because it dealt with a lot of philosophical jargon stuff.
I think Destiny was definitely frustrated towards the end.
Yeah.
But a big part of that is that what was the guy's name? Jeff?
Jeff, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Jeff would put forth these positions that he's like, oh, I have no proof for it whatsoever. I'm not, can't convince you. I've got no empirical data for it. I realize you guys are completely right there. Like in that regard, I was like, okay, like he's actually being honest. He's actually, sure. Being straightforward about it. But then he's like, and nothing can really convince me. Like I had my experience, and it's like, well, is that a reliable way of going about it? No, it's not, but I still have my experience. It was like just hitting a brick wall. It was like he's self-admitting that he's being irrational, that he's not using empirical evidence, that he's not being logical about this, that there's other ways that he could come to the same conclusion, that other cultures could come to the same conclusion using the same methods that he did. And he admitted all of that. And then it's like, but is your conclusion reliable? Are you sure about it? And he's like, well, as sure as I am that this pen is real. And it's
I think that was a false equivalence, don't you?
How so?
Well, because I can ensure that I know something that exists. And again, we can dive into when we get some more people in here, the whole Descartes demon thing and the brain into the vat. But when I'm looking at a pen, I can say, because of the way I do my epistemics, that I know that pen exists. Okay. And again, I don't think it has to do a damn thing to do with Cartesian certainty. It has to do with what we contribute to be knowledge. Right. And I could use a certain theory of knowledge to be justified to say that I know that a pen exists. I cannot think of a single theory of knowledge, and I know quite a few of them. Not one of them would he be able to use from a philosophical standpoint, because he's a philosopher, right? To justify his conclusions based upon his experiences. I don't know where he thinks he's epistemically justified to say this is the conclusion based upon reason. Now, if you just want to say, look, I have an irrational belief, I believe this for whatever reasons, and it's irrational, okay. But do you think that he was making it as an irrational or a rational position?
Well, here's the thing. If I have a hallucination and I see aliens coming down, to visit me, that actually is that on its own, if I have nothing else, no other framework of knowledge, I don't know anything else about how the world works, I have only my sensory perception, and I experience this vision of the aliens visiting, that is it's an observational experience that qualifies to me. In that instance, it would qualify as like evidence that, oh, there's something else out there, there's something that I'm experiencing. Now we can go a step further, though. We can break that down, and we can actually observe this type of phenomenon, hallucinations, seeing things, seeing visions, having dreams, and we can actually look at what's going on in the brain to generate this imagery in our occipital lobe, and we can actually see how this is coming about, and we can witness it going on in other people from an outsider's perspective, and saying, look, when I observe their brain, under an MRI, and we observe my own under an MRI, it's pretty much the same exact stuff. We can, take little samples of it and look at what it's chemically composed of. So like if you can do that, and you're able to start, kind of breaking down this notion that suddenly that is a reliable form of evidence, and it's not. And so no, I don't think he was being rational there.
Mm-hmm. And somebody had noted that Jack A in the live chat says, I think Jeff was using a Christian version of epistemology, not the actual real definition of epistemology. And I think you might have a point, Jack, in some way. Look,
1 sec. I'll be right back.
Sure. When he made the comment that he was pretty well not going to be able to change his position, and I don't remember the words he used, but it didn't seem like he was willing to change his position given any kind of additional information. That's not a rational position to take, especially when you're tentatively saying this is a conclusion that I've come to. I'm not justified to have that conclusion. I don't even know if it's a rational conclusion. If that's the case, and the best position you can take is to say, okay, I understand it's irrational, but let me look at more evidence and then maybe reformulate my position. But it sounds like he's reached a position that he doesn't even really want to reformulate his conclusion. And I think that's a dangerous precedent for anybody to take, especially somebody who claims that they really like philosophy. People that like philosophy are constantly reevaluating their positions a lot, because one position always puts stress on another position. There's this tension between a lot of philosophical positions, and I'm sure that anybody who's ever read a book on philosophy has spent hours laying awake going, shit, what the hell is my position? I know Chris does it all the time. I'm sure. Does that make sense, though, that when he said that it didn't seem like he was willing to really reevaluate his conclusion? Or is that, am I reading too much into that?
I definitely got that.
Okay.
And I think that's where Destiny was getting so frustrated, is that we kept asking him, is this a reliable way to know things? And is it a reliable way for other people to come to the same conclusion or to a different conclusion? And he kept saying no, and he kept agreeing with us that it wasn't a reliable way to prove things to other people. It wasn't a reliable way to know things, and yet, in spite of all of that, he kept saying like, "Oh no, this is just my conclusion." He didn't seem willing to change his mind, and it was definitely frustrating for me, and I think that's where Destiny was starting to get a little ticked as well.
Yeah, I felt bad.
He
for
seemed
Destiny.
pretty triggered.
He did seem triggered. And by the way, Rez, thank you for the $10 super chat. He says, I have to head off to work now. Thank you for bringing Destiny on. A longtime fan of both of you. That was a treat. Would like to see him back in the future. Enjoy the rest of your day, chat. Thank you, Rez. And yeah, I felt bad for Destiny because I could tell that he was getting frustrated. I didn't want him to be bored, and a lot of people, he has some fans in the chat. If you guys didn't notice, he has some fans going, hey, let Destiny speak. And by the way, Thomas and I, we're letting Destiny speak, but prior to going on, Destiny didn't really even know what the conversation was going to be about, right? And so we have to guide the conversation, and that's just how we run the show. And when somebody like Destiny, who's a big name, doesn't really have much to really latch on to, then we're going to guide it the way it's supposed to. We need it to have to go for audience entertainment. But I think Destiny just was getting frustrated for the same reason I think that Thomas put out, that Jeff didn't really seem to be giving any good reason for why he held his belief. And I think that is frustrating to all of us who, I believe very strongly, want to know the truth one way or another.
Well, at the beginning too, I thought it was going to be a bit more of a formal debate because it seemed like you were starting with opening statements, and Jeff kind of went on for a little while, and I saw Destiny taking notes, so I didn't jump in to stop him or to interject or to hand it over to Destiny. I figured we had a kind of a more trade-off type style.
Right. It's a huge discussion. I just didn't want Destiny to be bored, and he just seemed so frustrated that Jeff wasn't giving him any really good explanations for anything, right? I mean, I think Jeff was, I don't know, his epistemology was weird. I'll give him that.
Well, it seems like hi everybody. It seems
up,
it honestly seems like he didn't realize who his audience was. He's used to his audience being people who already hold these beliefs, who it's not really hard to meet their standard of evidence, and they so he's used to meeting a much lower standard of evidence as far as both epistemology and ontology.
You're talking about Jeff?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think you're right on that. I don't think that he knew what audience he was coming into, because most of us are not completely inept in philosophy. I happen to really like it, even though I'm not good at it, but I like it, right? So
and I'm sorry for using the E word in this after show. I'm going to do my best to not use that E word. I
will rip my ears off.
Yeah, I'm getting Destiny the link right now. I think he wants to join, so give me 1 second. Yeah, he does love that word, but it does work. But I don't think he was using it the way I would particularly use the word epistemology. So
right.
Well, he was also calling his own experiences, like his religious experiences, like facts. Like he derived those as something that you could show to somebody else, which doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think that it probably is a fact that he had those experiences and that he genuinely believed that they were, supernatural experiences. Because I've had similar supernatural experiences myself, and I've had stuff, where one time I was sick and I was, traveling, and I had, this vision, if you will. And I thought it was completely supernatural until I learned more about what was actually going on there, neurochemically in my brain.
It's hard for me to believe that there's a God that gives people individual experiences, that this is the reason they should believe. Because what happens to the people who don't get these individual experiences?
Right. Yeah, and that's what I'd ask in the comments section is does Jeff put himself on the same level as Moses and Elijah and Jesus and other people who have had these divine visions from God that have only apparently been gifted to a very select few, and he just happens to be among those chosen few?
Real quick, hey Lucifer, do you think you can drop this for a few? Destiny just wants to come in just for a few minutes, Lucifer, and then Dalek, and then I'll bring you back in. Is that cool? Thank you. All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I thought that he really liked the sound of his own testimony more than he liked actually talking intricately about what actually changed his mind. He liked just going on about his personal experience more than actually talking about like what is it that makes him believe what he wants to believe.
Someone else just joined.
Well, yeah, that's what Thomas was saying. He was if he was talking to an audience of a religious people, right, of a church. Yeah, hang on 1 second. I know this. If he was talking to his congregation, then what he was saying might convince them or at least keep them believing. But when he was talking to a group of skeptics and a group of non-believers, it doesn't work. It doesn't. I don't think that anybody would listen to what Jeff had to say and go, you know what, I'm convinced that he. His experiences were exactly what happened. Now, I think most people would say he did have these experiences. I'm not going to say that he didn't. I fully do believe that he did. I just think his conclusion is a little off. And by the way, welcome back, Destiny. Are you okay, man? Because you seem so frustrated, man. I felt really bad because Jeff was just probably driving a lot of people nuts with his convoluted way of thinking, but it seemed like you were just not happy.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So like it's your show, and so I don't want to like be too savage or whatever, but like
Okay, so this is the after show. Okay, so
Yeah.
that guy was a total fucking moron. The problem, like the problem that he uses.
Tell
his
us
own
how what you really
experiences-
think.
Yeah. So the problem using like if he has a master's in philosophy, there are arguments that one could make that your experience should trump all other things, or that maybe the pursuit of happiness is more important than the pursuit of truth, or that you can take an incredibly anti-realist approach to things and say truth is relative anyway. Why wouldn't I maximize my happiness? Like there's so many different routes that you could go to have an intelligent conversation, and these were all incredibly beyond him. I would be fucking shocked if he both had a master's degree in philosophy, and hadn't gone through some sort of traumatic experience that damaged his ability for cognitive rational thought. Like the guy was beyond redemption in terms of forming a rational, coherent argument, and he kept stumbling. Like I understand what you were trying to do, where you were kind of throwing him a lasso and being generous in his interpretation of things, because a lot of the things that he said, you could see what he's saying. So like postmodernists think that everything is the same. In a way, kind of, right? Where you're kind of rejecting certain narratives of society. Like there, but no, like this guy was consistently saying dumb fucking thing after dumb fucking thing after dumb fucking thing. It was very clear that he hadn't spent any time critically analyzing or thinking about any of these things. Everything he was giving was an incredibly surface level argument. It wasn't what I would come to expect from somebody who is like well versed or well studied in philosophy at all.
Well, you know
Exactly.
what?
Like,
You know what?
Can I just
jump
jump in for a quick sec? Because I wasn't particularly familiar with you. I'd seen you about, but a lot of your followers were in the chat, and they had this thing where they said every time Destiny got upset, he turned into rap god, and I think we saw that tonight, and I just thought it was.
That's hilarious. No, I was just gonna say, to your point, Destiny. I mean, I can fit in a size small shirt, but that doesn't mean that other people would look at it and say that doesn't belong there. I mean, it works, but not really.
Yeah, this guy said, he fucking said my epistemology so many fucking times. I don't even think he fucking knows what epistemology means.
No.
You can't say my epistemology.
We don't say the E word. We don't say the E word. Like it just, now I have to say pursuit of knowledge. Like I can't even.
Well, it's just like when I ask you, like, well, how do you know this is true or this isn't true? Well, my epistemology tells me. What the fuck does that mean? Well, it's what my epistemology says.
Your epistemology as opposed to everybody else's.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm glad Destiny didn't get mad at me. I really do try to steel man people's positions. So
no. And I totally agree with you. And normally I would be in favor of that. But like I threw that guy, he had so many chances to not be a fucking moron. And then like the thing that hurts is that like, so if I can borrow like a minute and 20 seconds of your time, okay? Like I don't. If you watch this video on 2 times speed,
I can't disagree with you.
That's how long it took him the other 44 times that he said that exact same thing.
I linked a video in the chat. Like if you watch this video on 2 times speed, like this guy is clearly fucking crazy. He's talking about how like fluoride is used in the water to despiritualize people. Like I hate it when religious fuckheads present themselves as some like objective people that recognize their own shortcomings, but then as soon as you get them off of any platform that demands like a monochrome of fucking critical evaluation, they're going to spew whatever insane fucking stupid crazy conspiracy bullshit that the earth is 6,000 years old, that fucking fluoride is killing everybody, that the earth is fucking flat. And as soon as he steps off of your show, that's exactly what he's going to go on.
He didn't even wait. Yeah. We asked him about Genesis, partway through the show, and he started saying that, well, to me, like I look at Genesis, I'm like, well, I don't know for sure that it's not 6,000 years old, but
that's what got me. That at that part of the conversation, I'm thinking, okay, we've just left the realm of I just have a belief that's irrational to I am actually
has a platform.
Now,
this guy he's a pastor.
How can he fucking say I don't care about justifying my beliefs to anybody? What is his fucking job? What the fuck does that even mean?
How does a philosopher say that? Anybody who likes philosophy would know that you want to justify your beliefs, with some exceptions, obviously, with properly basic beliefs. But who the hell sits there and says, "Well, I don't care if I have irrational beliefs. I don't really care one or other." That's not.
Then
that's
why did you waste fucking 6 years studying philosophy? Why the fuck would you waste your time doing that? And then no one justifies the fucking belief you have.
Can I humbly ask a question too?
Well, every time you guys nailed him down, he said, "Well, I don't know this for sure," but he backpedaled everything that you had a hard counter for.
But you don't have to know anything for sure. That's the weasel thing. When you say for sure,
absolutely.
When I say, "Hey, look, I have a pen in front of me. I know I have a pen in front of me." We're not talking about any kind of could I be a brain of that crap? We could dive into that, but it's useless. I still can say I know something to be the case. That's what knowledge means, that you something is true, you believe it to be true, and you're justified, or some other condition or truth tracking it's called. That's what it means to know something. You're fine. You can say that.
No, pens are a glitch in the matrix.
Pens
There's
the
definition
glitch.
here, because like I've always been told there, or I've always heard that epistemology is just the study of like knowledge. How can you know
Yes.
something if
Yes.
it's true or not? So I'm not going crazy. I'm
No,
not,
that's what it
because
means.
his use of it sounded more like he was saying like my epistemology is like my experiences.
It sounds like he
That's
okay.
not
There's two possible things that could be going on here. One is that he read the word epistemology and it sounds smarter than saying my personal philosophy, so he said epistemology every time. The second possibility here, because he didn't want to show his power level, is fucking cringeworthy. But a lot of Christians study something called presuppositionalism, and as part of presuppositionalism, their definition of epistemology, oftentimes, from what I'm familiar with, is to Christians, Christian epistemology means the way that I'm capable of experiencing the world is because God has endowed me. God has revealed to me the world. That God has revealed that my senses work. So anytime he's saying my epistemology, that's a substitute for God is allowing me to interpret my senses or whatever. And that might have been the way.
I think you might have a point there. I think you do have a point there. But the weirdest part is one of the fundamental thing of epistemology is justification of beliefs. What makes a belief rational? That is one of the most fundamental things in the epistemology, which you said is the study of knowledge, right? So he just pisses that away. Now, I will say something like within my epistemic framework, I use terminology like that, but you don't say my epistemology. I think that's weird to say that.
Because this is a valid point. We could have discussions of epistemology, like what does it mean to know something, or can you know something? Because in some ways, a lot of these conversations tie directly back into it, especially when we're talking about our experiences. For sure, these can be questions, but again, like, and I've never heard anybody that has like an actual philosophical background, like an academic background, constantly use the phrase, "Well, my epistemology tells me something." It's like, the fuck does that even fucking mean? Like,
yeah, because how you know something, how you believe something, why you believe something, these are all fall under epistemology and this thing called meta epistemology as well. What these words mean, what does knowledge mean, kind of thing. But I just bizarrely saying that, because of my epistemology. But I think you're right. Maybe he is a preceptor. I don't know.
Well, but his epistemology is based on a priori justification. I mean, it's not a priori justification that that relies on anything in the natural realm. It's based solely on not only anecdotal evidence, but evidence that's obviously while he was under some sort of psychotic or hallucinogenic episode, by his own definition.
Yeah.
Well, to be fair to the Christian's preceptor, they would say that a priori experiences are endowed by God, that those are necessarily justified. That's how the preceptor always attacks the atheist. They say, how do you know your a priori is real?
But that priori knowledge is only based on the God which they already had prior knowledge of, hence the priori.
Yeah, it's kind of okay. First of all, a priori knowledge doesn't require any other external justification as far as
but if you're debating a preceptor, they will say
right.
No, it doesn't. But
I think they're full of shit on that. I think they're totally full of shit on that.
It doesn't rely on any external evidence, but if you already have knowledge of this God, already have prior knowledge of this particular deity, then you do have external evidence around you, whether it's a Bible or whatever you base that belief on.
Yeah. By the way, 0132 has a super chat for 666. This is to Destiny. I fucking guarantee you that there's a rock in the asteroid belt that would be perfectly serviceable teapot. Fight me, Destiny.
Well, and that's the problem with the personal revelation arguments is you can't argue somebody out of a personal revelation. You just have to make them understand that a personal revelation is fucking personal. It doesn't apply to anybody else. But good luck with that.
Right.
And for me, I don't consider a personal revelation even really be that good evidence of anything. I've had personal spiritual things happen to me. I'm sure half of us have, if we've been from a religious background. They happen.
Yeah, and I don't mind people relating experiences. It's when they draw the conclusion. Then I'm like, right? If you relate your experiences, every experience I've ever told is the God honest truth, pardon the pun. But I mean, I have no reason to make shit up. Most people don't. Right. We have a congregation of people where we take people at face value. If you say that you've had these experiences, anybody in here, I'm going to believe them. Right? I have no reason not to. I don't play this doubt as a virtue bullshit. But when you tell me that the conclusion results in, that from those experiences of X, Y, and Z, then we're in a different territory. Does that make sense?
There's an
Yeah, and that's
excellent
what-
quote by Thomas Paine that says, "Revelation is revelation to the first man only, and hearsay to all thereafter."
Yeah,
But I'm
I know
kind of
that.
curious what Friended's take on this is, just because he hasn't
Bring
really.
Adam in here in a second. Adam, by the
Hey,
way,
what's up?
what's up, dude? One of the more
I had
liked
to
people on
actually
Twitter.
look up epistemology.
Yeah,
Epistemology.
as Rags would do.
The theory of knowledge, especially with regards to its method, validity, and scope, epistemology is investigation of which distinguishes justified belief from opinion.
Yeah, that sounds right. Yeah, because
Yeah.
again,
Seems
what
like
makes
there
it
is-
But
justified-
in my epistemology,
So
Hey, listen real quick. I love you guys. It was fun. Thanks for having me on. Okay.
I just appreciate it, man. I'm sorry
right.
that it probably wasn't as
Have a good one.
interesting as the
No,
Ian conversation,
no,
but
Have a
they
good
all
one.
can't be home runs. But people enjoyed it. I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. So
It was
Thanks a
good
lot.
having a chat with you, Destiny.
Hey,
Yeah.
Destiny.
What?
so there are multiple.
I had not heard
epistemologies, so-
of. I'd not heard of your, or I think I'd heard of your channel, but I hadn't checked it out. I'm definitely going to. But it was really nice getting to meet you and to mod that debate.
Oh yeah.
So-
Thanks a lot, guys. Have a good one.
yeah, go subscribe to Destiny if you have not. Videos. The link is going in the video description and the live chat. So go check
Okay,
them
so
out.
here's the scary
Is that
thing,
guy
guys.
finally gone?
As I
Right.
looked up Grupp's background, he has actually taught at actual universities.
Oh yeah,
Well,
I
That's
saw that.
terrifying.
Indeed, like he actually performed lectures, and he was actually paid for them.
I think Adam was about to.
Services, like
I think Adam was about to pipe in.
It was philosophy, I believe.
Yeah, just the epistemology stuff. I mean, if you look at the work of Joseph Henrich, he talks about how there's experiential epistemology as well. There is information that you can have through experience that you don't necessarily have a scientific understanding of. You just know that it works. So,
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I didn't listen to the debate, so I don't know the argument about epistemology. Obviously, if you can get scientific conclusions, you should do that. But there are tons of situations where you can't necessarily get scientific conclusions in like social sciences, in all kinds of areas. I mean, that's the whole point of having tradition.
Well,
what?
social sciences are still a science, just not a hard science. I'm going to
Well,
fight you on that one.
What curious what before we go down that rabbit hole, like you said that there's lots of examples. I'm just kind of curious what
What do you mean?
you were saying that there were lots of examples where you could gather information like that that's not something that you could verify scientifically, and I'm
Right.
just kind of curious what your examples would be.
tides come in, tides come out. You can't explain that.
For a long time they couldn't explain that, but I mean that's not. I'm thinking more in terms of like the structuring of society, like marriage as an institution is a thing that there's a big battle over changing marriage as an institution, and we don't necessarily know what changing that institution is going to do. But our experience with the institution of marriage tells us for this kind of investment, for this kind of behavior, we get a certain kind of outcome. But we don't necessarily
a lot
know.
more specific than that.
Yeah, because marriage has changed over time.
Yeah, you've got to be a lot
Yeah.
more specific than that.
And
why?
the idea of marriage varies depending on where you go and what culture you go to. I mean, but every culture has their own idea of marriage. But I mean, it's perpetuated mostly because you get a tax break.
Well, you're saying this version of marriage perpetuates this version of blah blah. You need to be
Right.
specific.
And-
about
and-
it.
Are you
It evolves as it evolves as it's convenient. Like for instance, now gay marriage, for example, is becoming more widely accepted.
Right.
There are certain things with marriage where if you weren't a virgin, it was looked down upon for you to get married.
But those forms of marriage haven't been time tested, so we don't necessarily know.
Sure, they
I'm
have.
saying
Sure,
is-
they have. They've
If
been
I'm right-
time tested
wait a
and they've
second,
evolved
wait a second,
into
wait
what
a
we
second.
know marriage to be now.
If I'm
Wait a
right,
second.
didn't
Wait a
Romans
second.
have at least a version of gay marriage?
Pirates did.
Well, let's ask Chris. He's the only virgin in here. Chris.
Hey.
The idea behind epistemology.
Let's stop
is
right
you're-
there,
you have-
motherfucker.
Dude, I got more poontang in the day than you've had in your life.
Actually,
Look,
Steve, that's
Okay,
probably true.
no one's had more
Shit.
poutine than Steve, but
Did the Romans not have a version of gay marriage?
What are you? What
no,
are you? What are you
okay,
using
wait,
to
okay,
distinguish
so
to
the
justify
Romans-
your belief? You guys are all making claims about marriage. I'm making claims about marriage. What are you using epistemologically?
No, my God.
Look,
Oh my God.
the epistemology of my marriage is is mine and nobody else's because it's my epistemology.
So you don't really. So you just want to joke around. You don't really want to.
No,
I mean, the whole idea behind epistemology is.
I'm honestly curious where you're taking this, because when you say that you're talking about marriage as an example, that we can't really come up with like a scientific framework to figure this out. But I'm like, wait,
Exactly.
isn't the scientific method that allows us to determine in the first place what types of marriages lead to
No,
better
actually, it's
societies?
not.
Like we
Most,
observe, and I'm saying this.
Don't
Can I
use the
please finish?
scientific method.
Yeah,
for the
let him
most part.
finish. Let him have the floor.
I'm kind of curious where he's going with this.
So my background is in political science, and we will observe things statistically over time, and we'll observe like if you change little things about society, like what are the outcomes. And it is a scientific process. It is an observational process where you're gathering data, you're gathering inputs, and you're saying, all right, if we do this, what happens? Are these just correlations, or is this a causal connection, and how can we eliminate all of the other factors that may be playing into it? And so something like marriage, I take kind of an eagle eye viewpoint of that, and I'm like, okay, so if this version of marriage is better than this, like we should be able to observe the results of altering it or changing it similar to a clinical trial, just from a much broader viewpoint. Does that make sense? It's still a scientific process.
I completely agree with you. What I'm saying is there's two ways to look at it. There is the way to look at it. I mean, I literally just looked up epistemology.
And now you're the expert,
I'm
right?
not familiar with this stuff, but like to distinguish a reason to justify your belief, there is a justification that it's worked this way. I agree with you that the scientific justification is always going to be better, but in a pinch, you don't always have the scientific justification. And people in this conversation are going to be making claims about marriage, and I'm asking them, how are they justifying those beliefs that they have about marriage?
Well, hold on.
Already several beliefs have come out.
Justify
Let him
anything.
finish. Let him finish.
I just wanted to be more specific in his claims, because he never actually specified what he means about who's getting married, what like what his claims on marriage are.
You tell me your claims of marriage, and then please tell me how you're justifying those claims.
Can I rewind this one moment though?
I don't know how this
I
started.
want to comment on one thing. One
Adam
specific thing on
started
this.
the marriage thing.
There's a specific thing we need to note here, that we can't actually look at the impact of gay marriage, and I think it's perfectly fine personally, but we can't look at it because we don't have the element of control to randomize.
Exactly.
We need to randomize, and so we can't, the correlation versus causation debate can't be destroyed because we can't do a clinical trial with the element of control. Two things needed for a clinical trial: one, the element of control, and randomization, and we can't do that.
I
No, I
think
do
you're
think
right on that, yes.
yeah, so that's the two things needed, and we can't do that. So
Brian, you're
Hold on. Let me just
Right.
switch that real quick because people don't, and I do appreciate it. Jake 3D says, doubt equals skeptical, does not equal cynic. Therefore, doubt is a virtue. Thank you.
What I would like to kind of posit as a counterpoint to what you just said is that you can take multiple instances. So for example, you could look at, okay, in the US, gay marriage became legal, and then what happened afterwards, and it's like, okay, you got a sample size of one. But if you start looking across 200 different countries and you see that in a wide variety of different cultural circumstances and settings, you look at before and after gay marriage became legal, and you can evaluate, you can separate out different factors and different elements and see,
Right.
like,
And yeah,
can I comment on that?
Hold on. No,
I do stats. That's what I do. I just want to comment on what Thomas said really quickly. He's correct, because what he's done there is he's actually controlling for multiple variables, and that's what we would do, is we would take the other variables and control for them, and that's what we do. So I
Exactly.
agree with that.
And that's
Sure,
how
and
that's
I
how
agree.
that's how any theory develops. Like Thomas said, the theory of evolution, for example, you know, it is much different now than what it was when it originated. You know, we've accepted new evidence and new variables that have come into the equation through our discoveries and through other additions into the factors that factor into the argument, and we've adjusted to compensate for that.
Well, the difference with
Absolutely,
evolution.
guys. Oh, hold on, time out, guys. Because what I was trying to get to is what the fuck Adam meant by all of this.
Nobody knows what Adam means half the time. Adam doesn't know what the fuck
We could actually, like,
Have you met Adam before? Adam doesn't know what the hell he's talking about half the time.
I'm
kidding.
sure that's the
Adam,
case.
I get along with Adam. I like Adam.
There's tons of stuff though that there's no possible way to justify your belief though. So I mean,
Such
Like
as
what?
abortion, like all the moral issues. Like
What?
Everybody has a justification for
Yes.
being
It's not-
pro
it's
or
not
anti-abortion. Now,
but
whether
it's
or not it's a good argument is a
Yeah.
whole different story.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
I've got tons of
Adam, are you saying that you
moral
can't?
situations that
Are
I
you
can
just saying that you can't get an ought from an is? Is that what you're getting at?
Ooh.
Duh.
Dun, dun, dun.
what I think that you can get an ought from an is,
You can't.
but I'm
I would like to
Before we
know
go down
how.
that path,
I'm hesitant to go
Chris, you want to
there.
finish what you're saying about evolution before we go down to this Hume path? Because this could take us in an entirely different direction. Trust me.
Yeti just wrote, "Shit, are we going there?"
Yeah, that's why I'm like,
I'm out.
I want
I'm
Chris to
out.
finish what he had to say first because this might go take a turn for the
What I
worse.
wanted to say is the comparison of evolution to marriage is of trying to do a societal test of marriage and stuff like that isn't actually a fair comparison, because you can actually do what Brian was talking about, do a controlled study of evolution in a lab. Lenski's E. coli experiments you can actually do. You can do the control and get the randomization. You can't you can't control for that outside, so that's why you have to sample from several different societies instead. So it's not actually an
I
comparison.
disagree. I disagree because that only applies to the current method of testing the theory of it for evolution. The current theory. If we were using the model for the original theory of evolution in a lab setting without knowing any of the extra knowledge that we knew after Darwinism, then we wouldn't come to the right conclusions or to what we know now to be evolution. So it's accepting new information as it's coming in, much like the progression of gay marriage and the additional variables that come with that.
Right, but you're missing the problem is that even with evolution the way it was back then, using that old model, you could actually still test that in a lab because natural selection is still testable.
But not every scientific test is a clinical trial.
Natural selection, yes, but you're not. We're not just talking about evolution, macroevolution. We're talking about different aspects of evolution that didn't exist with Darwinism. I mean,
right. So but then we would account for that with the new information. But the fact remains that you could still test evolution in a controlled environment in a lab. You can't do that with marriage right now.
I
don't know if you can do it ever.
70-80 couples just like in a white room. See what happens.
There's the problem.
Yeah, and that's what would happen if we tested evolution with the original model. Is we would come to a conclusion, yes, about the original model of evolution. Just like we would only come up with the current model of marriage if we only use today's society's idea of marriage. But if we,
I'm not saying using today's idea of marriage in a lab. I'm saying you can't test a societal construct in a lab.
Well, aspects of it you can.
Yeah, I don't see why you couldn't aspects either.
The
theory of evolution.
What are we? But a giant petri dish.
But the theory of natural selection was Einstein. It's not Einstein. Darwin's theory of evolution through natural selection has long been antiquated, right? He didn't have the knowledge we have of genes. So, the theory, when we say theory of evolution, we're talking about modern evolutionary synthesis, and a completely different thing from, as Jim noted, we have a greater understanding of these things now. And I think that even from social benefits of marriage, or even if someone wants to argue that it's maybe bad for society, we can do some kind of studies and some kind of controls. I don't know how that would be done, you can ask Brian, but I think it's definitely possible. Sure.
I'll explain briefly on that.
On
The way we would control for that is what actually Thomas mentioned, is we would collect more variables because you have lurking variables that might be the cause. So you have to collect all these variables. You have to have a larger sample. You have to collect more variables. And then you put those variables into the model. Like, okay, it might be these variables. If you include those variables, you can actually control for those variables. So Thomas was right on that. Just collect more variables and get more information. More information, better model.
Yeah, but that doesn't make sense. Oz for $5 says you can do a control test with gay marriage. Let's make Biodome 2.
Biodome 2 is already a thing. It would be Biodome 3.
Oh, well, okay. There you go. Biodome 3.
So, number 2.
You know the reason why we don't really do that anymore, though, is because in the 1970s we decided to test power shifting between police officers and prisoners, and we had actors take on the roles of officers and prisoners, and we had to stop the experiment within like a week because the officers went straight to abuse.
That was kind of a flawed trial, actually.
Yeah, I read that thing.
The guy who was running it wound up taking part in the thing. Just wasn't great.
He manipulated his own study. What you're talking about is the Stanford prison experiment.
Yeah, we've had other studies that have had the exact same problems occur, even without the flawed methodology.
Didn't Ted Kaczynski participate in that too? Which is another just weird thing.
Just as a real quick side note, Ted Kaczynski, has beautiful handwriting.
You're also talking about a very, very small amount of all possible variables being used in these experiments too, like a very, very small amount.
Okay, but if we're talking about scientific experimentation, that's going to happen.
Well, yeah, but you're going to want to have some sort of semblance of a ratio of variables that's enough to at least model after what we know. I mean, like, I don't, how many people were in that experiment? Like, were there men and women? Did these people know each other? I mean, there's a lot of different variables that go into that.
It was a tiny sample size,
it was all men,
and it was entirely men. And it was actually encouraged that, they were started, behind the scenes. What's his name? Philip Zimbardo was the psychologist behind it. And he was actually manipulating the experiment and encouraging people to behave in certain particular ways. And they felt like they had to in order to, get paid in order to make him happy. And so the experiment was not unbiased. It was very much manipulated.
Unfortunately, that's going to be what happens with any social experiment. Those people are going to say what they feel they need to in order to.
Not necessarily. There's blind tests that you can do.
Yeah. Well, and whenever you manipulate the evidence in a lab setting, every single time it changes the outcome of the experiment, and you do this to every variable, no matter how many times you do the experiment. Especially if you're using the same variables, you're going to come to a wrong conclusion.
I totally. I just chime in this. I totally disagree with that statement. It depends on how you control and how you manipulate, because a very well done experiment will have an element of a control that just manipulates one variable, and also you're talking here. Are we talking about participants?
Hold on 1 sec. I hate to be that guy, but what exactly is the point that we're getting to?
Well, what he's talking about is isolating one variable at a time, so you can see whether it's reacting with one, reacting with another, or whatever. What I'm saying is that it's not dependable. Studies like that with a small sample size, with a small amount of all possible variables being used in the experiment, they're not reliable experiments.
Okay, wait. Tell me why.
Actually, what I was getting at,
tell me why it's not reliable. I want to hear why it's not reliable.
General,
it's not reliable because you're manipulating not just one variable, but a large majority of them. So there's no way to isolate any of the variables or get any kind of median idea of whatever you're trying to arrive to, especially if it's some sort of a sociology experiment.
Here, let's let the statistician
go. Let's go with a pure example right here. Let's bake a cake. So we're going to bake a cake, and we're going to put certain ingredients in, and we're going to manipulate one thing. We're going to manipulate how long we bake that cake for. We're going to bake it for 10 minutes or 30 minutes. We're just going to manipulate one thing. So you're telling me there's an interaction now that I'm not accounting for?
You're still talking about one variable. That's not what I'm claiming. I agree.
You can't
one variable that doesn't affect the experiment. It's when you affect more than one variable or the majority of the variables in most of these cases.
Where I agree with Jim too is that we're looking at a sample size of like 15 people.
Guys, this was about gay marriage.
Gay marriage.
Before that we went off on the tangent.
I thought of two other ways besides science for epistemology as well.
Mention that one more
trial and error. There's trial and error where you like something works over and over again, but you don't necessarily know why it works. And there's also, I thought of another one that's even.
Doesn't that fall under science though? You're testing something to see if there's replicability.
Well,
it's part of the scientific method.
Yeah, Adam has a new word.
Wouldn't you have to actually know, like, have some understanding of the why it works? When you
that's when you start formulating. That's when you start formulating a scientific.
What if there's correlation without causation though? What if it's just
that's why. The scientific theory is saying how it works, but the data, as far as gathering the data and seeing is this replicable, is it happening again and again and again, that is part of the scientific method. You're gathering the evidence to form the
theory. Is the why though?
Exactly.
Why? But
so you don't know the why. You don't know the why. You just know that.
I think it's more the how.
Data.
The theory is the how.
Yeah, the theory is the how.
It's the how.
Real quick, super chat. Daniel Iris says, "Drink every time variable is said. I am now dead from alcohol poisoning." Epistemology.
But it doesn't always come from starting off at a how. That how is often comes up through discovery. Like for instance, like you were talking about in the show, the dark matter. It didn't come up because we were looking for dark matter. It came up because through discovery that hey, not all this mass is here. There's missing mass that we can't see somewhere. Photons aren't coming through. What's going on here? And so not everything starts out with knowing what you're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
I have to comment on one thing
that was addressing the why. Why do we see the things that we see? We see space-time bending more than it should. We see giant clusters of bodies, but they're exerting more mass than they should. So we see these things,
right?
And we have to come up with a reason why they're not.
No, we don't.
Wait, how are we talking about gravity now?
No, we don't. No, we don't. We don't have to come up with a reason. We can seek knowledge to try to come to a conclusion of why they're doing it, but there's no reason why we have to apply a reason to anything without pursuing knowledge of why it's happening. So, like for instance, like you said, the bending of space time, we can speculate as to why, we can theorize as to why, and as long as it agrees to our current models of understanding of what we know currently, as far as science goes, then if it matches up, it matches up, and if it doesn't, then we move on to something else, and we keep poking and prodding until we get enough knowledge to make a conclusion.
Well, there's a clear distinction here too between why and how. Like if I say I dropped my phone, well, why did it fall? It's like, well, you could say that, it fell because, gravity is pulling on it, but you're like, no. Like why? What was the intentionality? What was the purpose behind it? It's like, well, are we talking about my intentionality? Are we talking about God's intentionality of the universes? Or is intentionality just a stupid concept? Like where do you draw the line between why and how? I feel like those words are getting used interchangeably.
No. There's. I'm gonna lay some deep shit on you here, so prepare. But Ocean was saying, there's actually a paper that was written by Sosa on this particular topic. It's called "The Raft and the Pyramid: Coherentism and Justificatory Conditions," and he laid out there's a distinction between the two ways we can look at a theory of knowledge. Do we start with what we know and then we work to how do we know, which is called particularism? Or do we go backwards and start from what's called methodism, and then we say, how do we know something, and then formulate what do we know from there? So there's two distinct ways we look at the world of how we're going to formulate a theory of knowledge, and this applies to science as well. I particularly start with, I think, more what's called particularism, where we would say, how do we know, or what do we know, and then how do we know that? But that's just one way we can look at the theory of knowledge. So probably a lot of people just got lost on that. But if you want to look at the
I
way
follow
Ernest
it.
Sosa
No, that
would
makes
look
perfect
at that,
sense.
then he does very much distinguish between how we come to what we know, but between these two very fundamental different approaches.
Yeah, Thomas, I just want to say on your gravity comment, it's not falling because of gravity. It's because the air is less dense around your phone.
Oh
Come on, get it
God.
right.
Yeah.
But Steve, okay, so like Jeff is a flat earther, correct?
No,
Oh, he's not.
no.
Are you
I
sure?
never said he
Yeah.
was.
No, that would
Okay,
make them
'cause,
don't exist.
Okay. So
I
anyways, okay. So he has this belief, right? So he knows what the belief is, right? And he knows, but he doesn't know. I mean, but so if you start off at the belief that, let's just say that somebody believes in a flat Earth. If you start off at the belief that there's a flat Earth and you try to justify that and you try to seek, why do I believe that? Why do I believe the Earth is flat? And you start seeking that, then you will start seeking pro arguments for the existence of what you already currently believe, just due to cognitive bias.
That's insane, believing in the Earth.
I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. When we look at a belief and we say, how is it that we know what we know? That's where the theories of knowledge come in, to say that we're justified to say knowledge, right? Because you have justified belief, but then you have knowledge, and they're not the same thing. We can have justified true beliefs. That's not considered to be knowledge. We all know the
Yeah,
Getty
exactly.
problems, right?
Exactly.
Steve, hold on. Sorry. Brian said he had one thing and then he was going to drop out, so you can join in.
Yeah, Ocean's having conniption fit. We know how he is. He's like,
Okay. So this is the last point I want to highlight. It's actually from a while ago. There was the mention of small sample sizes, and you can't get results from small samples. So what I'd ask the people is, if we get a p-value below 0.05 with a sample size of like 15, 20, 30, small sample size, is that result invalid because it came from a small sample size? A p-value below 0.05, which is statistically significant, is it invalid because it came from a small sample size? And then
No, not at all. Not at all. But not unless you manipulate all the variables.
And so you are correct. I'll end with this comment here. You are correct. The result is totally valid because actually the way intervals work is the smaller your sample size, the wider your interval. So you actually have to get a bigger difference to find a result that is statistically significant with a smaller sample size. So if we find statistically significant results with a smaller sample size, it's that result is actually a larger difference than we would expect from the null. And so that difference is unlikely by random chance, i.e. p-value. So whenever anyone says, oh, it came from a small sample size, well, just look at the p-value. If the p-value is small, then the results are statistically significant. It doesn't matter that it came from a small sample size. It's just unlikely. Now, we do get into robust regression, all that good jazz. I won't comment on all that. I'll come back another time. But thanks, Steve, for having me.
Real quick, Brian, before you go, so you're all the statistics and everything. Do you believe that a sociological experiment such as gay marriage or something like that could be performed in a lab setting without manipulating the variables?
The softer sciences are really hard to deal with. I think Thomas. So okay, I'm just going to comment on that. What we have to do is what Thomas said. Holy Kool-Aid. And as he said, you take all the variables, you put them in, because if you put something into a multiple regression model, you're actually controlling for that lurking variable. So we have to think of these variables. When people talk about the wage gap, we can't control what salaries people have. We can't manipulate salaries. But what we can do is we can collect more variables. So by collecting more variables, we control for those variables. So if someone wants to actually test something, they need to go to these countries, collect certain metrics, and then control for these metrics. It's our best way of doing it outside of the gold standard, which is an experiment, which has two elements: one, the element of control, and two, randomization. And if you don't have that, you don't have an experiment which can't show cause and effect. And then you got a correlation, maybe is causation. I don't know. And yeah, you really can't say, but you just collect more variables. That's all you can do. So
but you can get closer.
Awesome.
You can get closer to figuring out.
I'm just glad we solved gay marriage tonight.
Always.
You
And
know,
Brian,
your sample size is
correlation
just small,
and
I'm fairly sure Ron
causation.
Jeremy knows
hey, Brian, before you leave, real quick question, Brian. Atheism is the null hypothesis?
Okay, wait. Okay, give me one 30 seconds on that tops.
Sure.
Okay, the null hypothesis is kind of whoa. I just hit my computer.
I get excited.
You tell me about the null, I get excited.
It's a sexy ceiling you got there.
Just say when the P is low, reject the null. When the P is high, just let it fly. That's my saying.
Type 1, type 2 error.
Type 1, type 1, the null is true. A type 2, the null is false. That's how I teach it. Type 1, the null is true. Type 2, the null is false. That's how I teach it.
False rejection. I like that. That's
Type
good.
1, type 2.
Nice,
That's
nice.
No true, no false. But with that in mind, the null would actually be, and this came up with I can't remember the gentleman's name. He has a very kind of northeastern accent. The null for religion would be the acceptance of no religion or the non-acceptance of no religion. So you shouldn't believe God is there or not there. I think agnosticism is the null because it's without knowledge.
That's what I would say.
Yeah, agnosticism is the null. And so maybe Steve, you like that a lot.
Thank you very much. We're all here. Thank you. Good night.
Now leave before you get dragged into more shit.
I'm gonna GTFA.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to disagree with him though, because the reason being is that actually the null is going to be would be an innocent position where you're not exposed to the proposition. But once you're being exposed to it, then yes, the agnosticism would be the null.
I want to disagree with you so hard, Steve, but that's not the conversation for tonight.
You can get it so hard. Get it.
Babies have the null.
It seems like every conversation
I don't know where we
Steve's
started.
channel turns into something about agnosticism.
Of course.
Yeah, no,
If we get stuck on that again,
not doing it.
I'm gonna lose my shit.
You're trying
about it.
too soft. There's a pill for that.
So what do you think?
I think we need to talk about correlation and causation.
No, guys, we have to
Just
understand.
David Hume out of here.
We solved gay marriage tonight somehow.
No, I don't think that
Something
anybody
productive
was
happened.
talking about gay marriage. That was one of the things that I was frustrated about in the outside. Is that like Adam just asked a question about how you could verify something about gay marriage, and then we wound up talking about statistics for half an hour.
Yeah,
So,
it was hilarious.
like, what
I think we can all agree statistics suck.
Oh yes.
What-
Yes.
what is there like there's an argument that's happening somewhere about gay marriage, and in this whole statistics conversation we lost exactly what the fucking point was, going back to the beginning of this, which was
I tried.
something about the advantageousness of actually legalizing gay marriage. Is there somebody that's against that in here, or why did this discussion like pop up in the first place?
There are
That,
people in the world that are against it, and there are people that are in favor. I'm going to guess everyone in this live stream is probably in favor of it. I'm just saying that you're in favor of it because you have certain beliefs, and epistemology is about how you justify those beliefs, and I'm not necessarily sure.
We're not talking about epistemology when it comes to gay marriage. We're talking about.
Oh, yes, we are. It is the most used word. We are definitely talking about epistemology.
Are we going into epistemology when it comes to gay marriage? We're talking about societal management at that point. Like you start getting into like value judgments of like whether or not you should have a free society.
Well, it's interesting that you put it in terms of societal structuring, because that's exactly what I'm thinking. Like,
yeah, but what you're talking about is a monopoly of knowledge, because people claim to know that gay marriage is bad for society, and they've kept it out of society because for one reason or another, their justified knowledge tells them that they.
Yeah, the gays are going to make everyone else gay. Come on, it's infectious.
Yeah, well,
the argument needs to be around what is going to be the justification for providing a restriction upon people to have a gay marriage.
Do you have?
I don't have one. I mean,
do you have knowledge? Do you have knowledge that society that first of all, I'm completely in favor of gay marriage. What I'm saying is, gay marriage has not been tried in society yet. Correct? Are we in agreement?
Correct. We're doing that right now.
So yes, we are testing it through
It has a
process of trial and error. Are we not?
Again, I'm pretty sure.
Absolutely.
Well, hold on. I'm pretty sure. Hold on. I'm pretty sure.
What is our justification that it's not going to turn society into something?
Adam, breathe. Adam, breathe. Go ahead, time.
I'm pretty sure the Grecians did allow gay marriage. So
are they still around?
Well, they
didn't get eliminated because of gay marriage.
Well, yeah. I don't know this.
So if we don't know the outcome, we should try.
Well, what I'm saying is, I think it's been tested before, and it was just fine.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is what you're basing your justified belief on.
No, that's not
gay marriage.
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
So what are you basing your justified belief on?
Well,
because it doesn't fucking matter.
Okay, so it doesn't matter. That's what you're basing your belief on. Okay.
No. Yeah. It's none of my goddamn
Well,
business.
Let me ask Adam real quick. Serbia says
We're getting off topic.
yeah, it's not gay if there's no eye contact. That's true. And once you're underway, yeah, once you hear that bell that you're underway, it's not.
Just close your eyes.
It's only gay if our beards touch.
Yeah,
Steve.
as long as you're not doing the standard.
The beards have to hug.
Go ahead, Ocean.
But Adam, do you have a belief that somehow gay marriage? I mean, you said you're not against gay marriage, but do you have a belief that somehow gay marriage is detrimental to society?
No, I don't.
Okay.
No, he's wavering in the uncertainty. So
I'm saying that we don't scientifically know if it is, and there is a different type of wisdom. There is a different type of knowledge that people bring to the table. They say we've always done it this way. It's worked this way. So we are risking.
Called conservatism.
I actually disagree with that. I mean, Massachusetts legalized it in like 03, 04 or something like that. So I mean, we've been testing it for the past 15 or 16 years.
He's not going to say that we've tried it until it's been
but if you look at the societal impact of gay marriage being instituted in the early 2000s and gay marriage being very prominent now, 15 years later, there's a very different societal outlook on what gay marriage is and what they thought would be the outcome based on new evidence, based on new information being brought in. So people no longer think that, we're going to have fire and brimstone being rained down on us like Sodom and Gomorrah for allowing butt sex, but because we, new evidence has showed us, hey, maybe this isn't such a bad deal.
So you're basing your belief on the Massachusetts doing it and it working out okay for the last 15 years. That's
no. I'm simply saying that it is an experiment that we are collecting those variables. It's not my belief. I have not had a problem with gay marriage since before it was instituted. Because it met my standard of belief. The evidence met my standard because it didn't bother me. I didn't think that it was going to rain down fire and brimstone. So it
sounds like
it didn't bother me.
Sounds like you just have an intuition.
Well, first of all, intuition.
Welcome to conversations about morality.
Yeah, intuition.
You're gonna have, if you have a conversation about morality, you're going to be appealing to intuition.
Yeah, intuition is
now, the question about whether or not, as from a societal management standpoint, the question of whether or not it should be legalized should be focused on what are the effects that are feared when it comes to gay marriage. Now, Jim brings up a point that
I like this Ocean guy. He's a rational guy. I like that.
So when you're looking at like what Jim brought up was saying that he didn't fear that fire and brimstone was going to come down, which is usually what the defense is. It's not necessarily always a defense, but you do get that where it's like, if we legalize gay marriage, you have this religious belief of saying, well, God's going to punish the entire nation.
That's a bad hypothesis.
Is that going to be the concern? Is that the reason why we're going to stop doing it or not do it? I don't think that's necessarily a good reason. So what are the other reasons that we're discussing that would be against gay marriage, that would be a good hypothesis to put forward as a reason why it shouldn't be implemented?
If it was to be outlawed or failed to be implemented, what would be the cause of that?
Oh, no, I'm disagreeing with Adam here, I think.
I totally agree with you.
What's happening? Because I think that what's happening is that Adam's putting forward an idea. Okay, maybe we're disagreeing. Maybe we're not disagreeing. I don't think we are. Okay, so what I am disagreeing with is this idea that the whole conversation needs to be centered around experiments and statistics of because we start getting into this like experimentation thing, which is this is part of what I think. If I'm going to get edgy on you guys, this is part of what I think atheism starts to put you in this mindset of all of a sudden anything that you believe, if there's a moral thing or a societal structure thing, all of a sudden you have to have some kind of scientific evidence for it. When discussing something that's sociological, which is a soft science, you're not going to be able to get that kind of confirmation or that kind of certainty with subjects like this. So then you get into the different question of if you're going to have if you're going to axiomatically run a society on the basis of having personal freedoms, which is largely what America is trying to do, what is the argument against having gay marriage?
Well, the argument is that you always, like whenever you're running a society, you have to place. There are certain situations where you have to put the needs of the society above the needs of the individual. Societies range on a spectrum of being very individualistic to being very collectivist. So I mean,
you're gonna have to
Right,
wind
well,
down to gay marriage real quick, otherwise it
How
doesn't
would you
matter.
show harm with gay marriage?
Okay, so the reason that plays a factor in it, a huge factor, is because that there is a societal consensus that is immoral. That's why it hasn't been. That's why there is a problem with it.
Hold on. Time out.
As society,
morality.
as society as a whole, all been wrong before. Hey, hold on a second.
We legalize.
Hold on a second.
So
no, I said the consensus.
Hold on, guys. I want to hear what Adam's got a response to.
Has society as a whole ever been incorrect?
Yes.
Very
Yes.
much so. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
So just what you're saying is like, okay, so what?
But
So
we
it's-
won't know until we try it.
Yeah, exactly. Trial and error. That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah,
and that's
but
not a,
wha-
that's
yeah,
not
yeah,
a
and-
scientific method.
But
But
do you
it's-
have
that is part of the scientific method. That's very much part of the scientific method, you know. And to play the devil's advocate here, I think that, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I was getting from you is that you were saying in order to see if like gay marriage is good for society, you have to run the experiment to see, not necessarily like is fire and brimstone going to rain down, but like do crime rates go up when people have two moms and two dads versus a mom and a dad? And you know, I'm very much in favor of gay marriage, but that's a legitimate question to ask.
That's not an experiment. That's just a social observation that we're seeing. It's not a controlled experiment.
It is a social
observation is just a part of it. There's a lot more to that. There's repetition. There's peer-reviewed evidence. I mean, there's
We have a 15-year study.
Okay,
the entire scientific method.
Let me ask the question: does anybody have evidence that it is a problem?
It says
No.
in the Bible.
Why does there have to be evidence that it's a problem to continue the
Step
experiment?
away from whether or not there's evidence that it's a problem. What are the proposed possible problems?
Well, no,
I don't think we can know that.
We need to start with there first.
Fire
before
and
we start talking about
brimstone.
evidence. Yeah, right. So we have fire and brimstone. I think everybody in
No,
here
I
agrees
think we
that's
all
probably
agree
gonna
that
be
that's
the case.
not. I don't think.
But it's
I think we all
proposed, yeah.
agree that that's not going to happen.
Right. But that's
Right, it's proposed.
We can all agree.
Our agreement
Like,
not in any way relevant.
Right.
Since you can make the argument that since gay marriage has been legalized, hurricanes have gotten strong.
Time out. Too much.
Exactly. There's a justification for the belief.
I can propose a bunch and I think that they're ludicrous, but I can say, you know, okay, let's observe, do kids who come from families that are, you know, where they have two moms and two dads versus, you know, just a mom and a dad, do they have higher rates of depression? Are they more suicidal? Do they have are there higher crime rates? Are there you know, there's a lot of stuff like this that we can start to ask these questions. That doesn't mean that
ridiculous, though.
That doesn't mean that they're, you know, that there's anything to them, that there's any merit
should,
to them.
We should ask the questions.
Yeah,
I agree.
I think that they're ridiculous. That I think that anybody thinks that they're going to cause a significant problem with those things, but I don't think those are unfair questions to ask.
No, I don't think that anything.
We absolutely should ask those questions.
I don't think anything in science should be. But I don't think that we should be emotionally opposed to gathering data ever.
No, but there's a difference between asking the questions and assuming the answers.
Yes.
And a lot of people assume the answers before we have the information.
Right, but what do they assume that knowledge based on?
Nothing. Their personal feelings. Bullshit.
Yeah.
But we have this idea that it's considered immoral, and that's something that I think that our society has kind of looked at and been like, well, that seems arbitrary. So what's as far as this subject is concerned, it seems arbitrary. So what are the concerns after that of what kind of effect it's going to have on people if we legalize gay marriage? What I'm looking for is for somebody to be like, all right, well, what are we arguing against as far as the concerns that are being put forward besides fire and brimstone?
What about civil unrest?
Well, they like to say they can't have children.
That doesn't matter.
That doesn't. I mean, legalizing gay marriage isn't going to get rid of heterosexual people, so that's probably not an issue.
But some of them argue that the rates of homosexuality increase when it's normalized, and that people who are somewhere on the spectrum will be more likely to lean gay or to get into, you know, gay relationships, monogamous gay relationships, and so then the total fertility rates will plummet. And if you're living in a society like China that already has a one-child policy, then that can be a problem. Or if you're living in places like Russia, which have below a 2.1
well, hold on. Yeah, see,
that have a below a 2.1 rate TFR. So what's happening is their population is going into decline, which is putting a big burden on the welfare of the society, because you have people who are retiring and you don't have enough of a base to that pyramid to support them. So there's stuff like that you could postulate. Is there any actual merit to it? Is that the gay marriage actually that strong of an influence on it? There's nothing that I've seen to indicate that that's even remotely the case.
There's tons of problems with that.
I agree. I'm just saying, like, these are the things that we should
I'm not
think about.
I'm not saying you're
We all realize that there's problems with it. I'm just wanting to get issues on the table that could be something that we can rationally discuss as being an argument against. Because with just like tossing out, how you could do an experiment or whatever, it's meaningless unless you have like something you're concerned about.
And that's why I'm playing the devil's advocate here.
Right. No, I'm agreeing with you. I think that.
What about civil unrest?
Is there
what
any
about
other?
civil unrest or societal division? Even further further marginalizing these different groups of people, and
it's been legalized in one of the most conservative countries in the entire world. So I don't think that's legitimately a problem anymore.
Wait, what?
Anymore? Yeah, right. I mean,
what country are you talking about?
Yes. So this all goes back to what I was saying about the experience on since 2003, and we know now that, like you said, we know by now that it's not going to be a problem anymore. But we didn't know that in 2003. In 2003, even the people who were pro gay marriage, like myself, were just like, man, I wonder what the fuck's going to happen. Like, are these people going to lose their shit, or is it going to be all right? And it took 15 years for people to be like, okay, well, maybe everything's all right.
What's another important side to this that nobody has brought up?
That's just how societal changes work.
An extremely
right, but
important
not just societal, but I mean also statistical. They're also tracking these statistics like one big experiment. I mean, and like Thomas said, they're also attributing it to crime rates and birth rates and everything else.
Well, an extremely important aspect to this too is looking at what are the results of not legalizing gay marriage. What are the downsides? And you look at, for example, the suicide rates among the LGBT community and people who feel so marginalized and they feel bullied and ostracized, and people who are thrown in prison. You look at people like Alan Turing, the father of computer science, that was basically chemically castrated and wound up committing suicide at a young age because he was gay and because he was involved in a homosexual relationship. You look at cases of gay people that are being stoned to death in the Islamic State, or people who that there's severe punishments in like Saudi Arabia. A lot of countries have the death penalty for gay marriage, mostly Muslim countries. But when you look when you look at those situations, or they'll have anti-sodomy laws and stuff, there's a tremendous amount of suffering that occurs as a result of it. Clearly it's not in someone's well-being to be stoned to death or to be chemically castrated. There's a lot of harm that's done. So you have to look at both sides of what are the consequences of doing it, what are the consequences of not doing it.
Tom, can we agree that there's so many variables that we don't necessarily know that we have?
Hold on, Adam. What was that?
Can we agree that there are so many variables that we ultimately don't know the answers to these questions until we try it?
No,
I think that we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that it's not in someone's well-being to be stoned to death.
No, yeah. but there's
hang on,
Adam. We know beyond a shadow of a doubt that these people don't deserve to be ostracized for any reason. And we can make every moral justification in the book that that's the case.
They don't need to be driven to the point of suicide either.
Especially that. So
do individuals make sacrifices for society? Which is more important, society or one individual?
Okay.
We
already legalized gay marriage. What did you sacrifice?
I'm for gay marriage, dude.
Okay, I know, but what did you sacrifice anything?
We'll see.
Again, what we're talking about.
No.
All right.
Have you sacrificed?
There's hypotheticals that want to be put forward rather than just going after somebody individually. You can say, what is the potential sacrifice of legalizing gay marriage?
Yeah. Okay, yeah, but have you sacrificed anything, or are you going to?
I mean, I haven't, but everybody in here fucking supports it. So the
Well,
question is going to be,
There-
what are the
Hey,
potential?
Can I chime
we
in?
know now by
Somewhere
our
there's a
current model, our
conservative with
current
high
idea
blood
of
pressure right now that is sacrificing.
Yeah, and can I chime in real quick here? Because I have sacrificed quite a lot for gay marriage. I'm pan myself. I'm in the LGBT community. You know what I've sacrificed? My mental health from being in an oppressive situation for most of my life where I wasn't allowed to be a part of it. But then I also sacrificed about every single friend and relationship I had pushing for the movement.
Right. You
So I
sacrifice.
have sacrificed a lot for it, and I can say hands down, a lot of people do sacrifice a lot for that movement. So yeah, there is quite a bit of cost that goes into it.
And when you're talking about, Adam, you were asking a question of, what's more important, the individual or the society. The thing is, society is composed of individuals. And I see both sides of it because I lived in Russia for a while where it has a very collectivist mindset rather than the individualist Western viewpoint on society. And I get that. But at the same time, you're looking at the LGBT community. It's not just one individual here and there. Like it is a part, it is a culture, it is a community, it is a collective group. So it's not really an either or.
Well, it's a democracy over here, isn't it? Did you say Russia? Isn't Russia a autocratic regime?
It is a faux democracy.
Yes, so they're faking it. They're really an autocratic regime.
I mean, they vote.
But no, but there's that.
Don't
There's
count the votes, but
there's a difference though between
There's ballot boxes. They're not
democracy and
turned on.
autocracy. There's a difference between democracy and autocracy and societies that value the collective over the individual.
But I think everything that you're saying is completely valid. Like all the arguments that you're making are rational.
So what's
evidence-based arguments.
Oh, let him finish. Let Adam finish.
I'm just.
Well, I just want to know what his point of contention is.
The point of contention is that there is the law of unintended consequences, and there, like, we don't know what we don't know. Like
that,
whenever you change society in dramatic ways, there is a risk.
If this conversation was about slavery, would you be saying the same thing?
I was going to say the same thing.
I mean, with any
This was one of
systemic
the- this
issue,
was one of the arguments.
you are going to have with any systemic
having
issue
slavery
that
was
you
way
go in.
worse. The economic value that they unlocked by getting rid of slavery was way better. Sorry to cut you off. Go ahead. You have the floor. Let's let Thomas moderate. You say who gets to talk.
Yeah, so I don't think that it's fair to attack Adam from a standpoint of like, oh, hey, you're advocating against gay marriage. I don't think that that's where he's coming from. I think that
I don't think so.
No, we're not saying that.
Nobody said
I
that.
think he's playing the devil's advocate here to look at the societal cost and to see and it's a legitimate question.
Yeah, but
we proposed a legitimate counterpoint.
Thomas, why don't you pick who's talk?
Look,
No, saying what aboutism? Well, what about slavery? It's not a legitimate counterpoint.
Yeah, it is. It's showing that we have changed society.
It's not what about slavery.
We know the answers on slavery.
You're talking about the societal impact.
All right. So the question would be, did we know what the societal impact would be at the time that it was banned?
No, we didn't.
No, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because any societal, any systemic issue in society, slavery, gay marriage, whatever the case may be, anything that you go to attack, it's going to have unforeseen consequences. That doesn't mean that we factor those into whether we should pursue that knowledge or not. If it is a constant variable in every single experiment, do we just not experiment because it's a constant? No. We continue the experiment and use the variables, keep the constant. We test against the constant.
There are experiments that have gone wrong, though. There are societies that no longer exist because of the changes that they made.
Yes, they are. And whenever you make changes in an experiment that don't that conflict with what we know to be the current model, then that experiment's not going to work. If we're trying to replicate evolution, for example, inside of a lab setting, and we don't allow any replication, or if we do allow replication but we start killing random variables, then that's going to fuck things up.
Well, hold on, time out. There's no common denominator with all those societies that have gone extinct that was we gave them more rights. That's not a common denominator from all of them. It was they got conquered or they killed themselves. And none of that
I have a book
or they migrated
with you that was written when a ton of societies were collapsing and being blown apart. It's called Plato's Republic, where he actually says that giving people lots of extra rights is what causes the downfall of society.
Yeah, exactly.
he also said that in a night and a day Atlantis sank.
You got to do. It's
He was using that as a metaphor,
right.
so it wasn't even saying it's correct.
Hold on. What societies did Plato outline their downfall?
He was outlining the downfall of democratic society, actually.
No, what society specifically?
Yeah.
It was literally a metaphor for ancient Greece,
Right.
which had legalized gay marriage, by the way.
Yeah.
Christopher knows what he's talking about here.
No, he absolutely does.
Doesn't seem like it.
But we're not talking about an actual society that got more rights.
The entire Plato's Republic was half of it a metaphor.
I mean, if you don't
for
consider
ancient
Athens a
Greece.
society,
Well,
I don't know why you wouldn't consider Athens a society.
Yeah,
But ancient Greece, though, was the empire lasted for hundreds of years, and
ancient Greece wasn't an empire; it was a unified system of city-states.
there was a Greek empire.
There was a Greek empire under
The
Alexander. There was a
Macedonian Empire, but that's 100 years
conquered
after
Greece.
Plato.
and it lasted. In
We're not
spite
talking
of-
about the same societies, Thomas.
Alexander's
Plato-
empire lasted till he died.
And then it collapsed.
It didn't last very long.
Did Plato actually outline a society that fell?
So just to put a parallel to evolution on this, because you can think of social science as kind of cultural evolution as well. And the gay marriage thing, I mean, it is a change to society.
Evolution.
What's that?
Oh, I was making a Ken Ham joke.
The gay marriage thing, I mean, if there are tons of mutations that happen at the level of the organism that are neutral. Some are actually better and those get incorporated and saved. Some are worse and the organisms die and those die out. But I mean, cultural changes happen that you hope are neutral, and that's really what we're hoping for on the gay marriage thing, right? It's like neutral society wide and it's better for the individuals.
You're conflating evolution with morality.
But morality plays into this because the population is basing their opinion on gay marriage. The large majority of the anti-gay marriage population is basing on their perception of morality. So yeah, morality does definitely play into this.
No. I'm not saying
There's a really interesting question that was posed in the side chat that I want to toss into the group here. It was Red Vetcher said that I'm gonna word it as a question: if a society that has slavery ends slavery and then their society falls as an obvious consequence of this, should they have ended slavery?
Yes.
Yes.
If you have to build your society around owning other people, you didn't build a stable society, and it doesn't deserve to work.
That's
absolutely, because you are sacrificing a small society with a small slave population to something that could be extreme and perpetuated around the world. That could be so much worse.
I'm interested in what Adam thinks about that, because he seems to be the.
Well, since the evidence is so overwhelming that slavery is actually a detriment to an economy, I can't imagine it being that way.
Well, it's a hypothetical, right? Just having this doesn't mean that we shouldn't end slavery,
obviously I'm not in favor of slavery, and I think just that would be the mind rebels at it, because then slavery it's kind of like proposing, like, what if the Nazis won the war? Because then
the question
actually have a really good analogy for this situation. What if
slavery would still be wrong?
A massive solar flare?
Hang on, guys.
I've got a thing that I'm trying to chase down already.
Let Jim finish, and then we'll jump to Ocean.
Okay, so what if a massive solar flare created an EMP wave and it knocked out all of our technology? Okay, we depend on our electronics and our technology, like the colonials depended on slavery to help the economy and to help them and to do things that they didn't do. You know, if we did that willingly, if we created an EMP wave willingly, you know, I mean, we would obviously look at you know, any unforeseen consequences and compensate for that. And I'm sure people who were going to end slavery looked at the pros and the cons of that before they even argued their point. But my point is like at the end, a general consensus was made, whether it be based on morality or outside knowledge. Maybe there was somebody who was sitting in the middle who really had no say on the morality of slavery, but they couldn't understand economically how it would affect, and that was their deciding factor. So it really depends on personal level or standard of evidence.
I think Ocean had something he wanted to say.
So what I'm chasing down with Adam is with asking that question wasn't necessarily a question of whether or not slavery was moral. It was the question of actions of the society. That if society has slavery, ends slavery, and then falls as a result of that decision, should they have ended slavery? And
yes,
you know, we automatically have a net loss from ending slavery here because the society has ended, everyone dies or whatever. But the question is about the consequences of the decision and then making the decision. I was interested in what Adam's thoughts would on that. Right. Are you a consequentialist when it comes to society management? And that comes into that question about gay marriage. It can be applied.
No, I don't necessarily know if I'm a consequentialist because I'm not a philosophy guy, so I'm not real down on the terms. I mean, just my own, like, obviously slavery's abhorrent, like, and the idea, I've read so much on how slavery is a detriment to an economy that I struggle to figure out how not.
But the how doesn't
slavery
matter. The how doesn't matter. It's a hypothetical
Right.
regarding the situation.
Well, it matters though in that. So you can make a thesis that slavery couldn't be that the society couldn't endure against a free society because the free society would outcompete the slave society, which I think has happened. We have seen that. So therefore you would infer that it is immoral to do slavery, and that actually goes with the cultural evolution aspect to it. Both of those work together. But what you're doing is you're proposing something where the cultural evolution actually goes against the morality. And I think morality actually evolved to as a way to push culture in the right direction. Like, I think our moral intuitions sometimes are completely wrong, but ultimately the same way as evolution works, slowly build up over time and push us in the right direction.
So boiling down the question to make it so that it's not necessarily about slavery is society does something that is morally right and ends as a result of that moral action. Should they have done the moral action?
See, I would say that the action was not moral, though.
Because it brings about an end? And that would be the concern with gay marriage then, is that if it brings about
it would
negative consequences, then it
would only be considered immoral if you had prior knowledge of it. If it was post knowledge and it was somebody after the civilization looking back on the fact, they may deem it immoral, but it doesn't matter how it will be viewed. It matters how it's being viewed.
Did the Nazis do the right thing? I'd say that they didn't, and I'd say that their society ended. I'd say that they did the immoral thing and their society ended as a consequence of it.
Society defeated several societies before it ended, though.
Exactly, and millions of lives were lost.
Well, yeah, but what's the point there? Like, what?
It's just so you can say ended, but did they knock out a few people on the way? Sure.
Ocean. I am interested in your thinking on this, because what I'm talking about is, it's this idea that you can get around the is-ought problem through this Darwinian framework. that you can arbiter moral claims by the consequences of it. I don't know if that's consequential.
I mean, my position is going to be that the moral action is what should take precedent rather than, what necessarily the effects might be. So let's say my answer to that would be yes, they should have ended slavery, and that I'm willing to hold on the hill of moral precedent. Because I realize that morality. I disagree with Izot. The Izot position of you saying that you can get an ought from an is. I don't think that's the case.
I think we got to the end of that hypothetical.
Because I mean,
I think that hypothetical is done. I don't think we can learn anything else from there.
I gave Adam my answer. I was because he said he was interested in my thoughts. So
no, absolutely.
That's how I would answer the question.
Do you think that societies can make immoral decisions and thrive based on those immoral decisions?
Yes,
I mean, I have a reason based.
Yes,
I have an evidence
yes,
right, so
absolutely.
Two things. He's asking me.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, two things. I think that yes, they can, and that's irrelevant to the question that was put forward. That if you have a society that has slavery, you can obviously see that you can do interesting things with slavery, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's moral. Like just because that you can do something that's effective with it, there's obviously we can go like dark side and light side with shit and say, well, if you can do the fast and easy path or whatever, and you can get effects from it, or you can do something that is considered more moral and maybe it doesn't work as quickly, but it has longevity to it.
Now, how do you know this? Where are you getting
longevity from doing something that's immoral?
How do you know this though? That's my question.
Well, you have the Roman Empire, which had slavery in it. That's the longest. That's the longest existing, most enduring empire that has existed on our planet, and it had slavery. So yes, you can have proliferation while doing something that we consider immoral.
Wasn't it outcompeted by societies though that didn't have slavery?
No, it had a financial collapse and then was conquered by other civilizations that did have slavery.
So all civilizations had slavery.
No, I don't think so. Not at the time, but the Germanic civilizations that came in and tore the Western Roman Empire apart had a system of thraldom, which was akin to slavery. It's basically the same thing.
Rome was about 97% of every single person in the city of Rome alone was a slave.
What about Rome alone too?
Or not necessarily a slave, but a non-citizen. Which
slaves, actual slaves. There wasn't a whole lot of distinguishing also between non-citizens and slaves in Rome.
Well, but they did have a big distinguish between what you were as a citizen versus a non-citizen.
And these societies, though, the point is that they didn't have prior knowledge of what these consequences would be. For generations, for dynasties, the Romans and the Egyptians thrived on the backs of slaves. They built their civilizations, their entire dynasties. They mined precious metals. For years, people were born and lived and died at the benefit of having slaves. So yes, I mean that there were not consequences for many millions of people because of slavery. So just because it ends and we can look back on it and say, oh, they got what was coming to them. As a whole, as a society or as a civilization, they did. Yeah, it collapsed. But to say that they didn't gain any wealth or any progression as a society from slavery is I think intellectually dishonest.
Let's push this thought experiment a little bit further. Let's say that you take a society like the Vikings that go out and they pillage and plunder, and obviously it's to the detriment of other societies. It's not healthy for the society being invaded, but to the Vikings, it's extremely economically advantageous to loot. But there are better frameworks. We look at Adam Smith and we look at the rise of modern economics. We look at things like comparative advantage that allows trading between societies to have even more well-being that occurs. So in retrospect, in hindsight, it's really easy for us to say like these societies are more moral because, they have a nonviolent way of obtaining success. But to put it back on Adam, just because that isn't the most economically viable model doesn't mean that it's not successful. Would you say that because it's still a successful model and it's still giving them economic advantages over neighboring societies, is it moral then in those circumstances for the Vikings to loot and pillage and plunder and kill?
What we're doing?
Minor correction: the Vikings definitely traded too, but
Well, I'm not saying that they didn't, but I'm saying
I'm fucking with you. But yeah, no, I'm. Go ahead.
So what we're doing is we're kind of addressing our individual moral intuitions. And my idea, and I'm not sure this is the case, but I think perhaps the more like what is moral is generally better for society. Like I know an example of the Spanish conquistadors and the English when they were coming over to America. So the Spanish conquistadors, there was the Aztecs had a framework of elites that controlled society that very much ran under the yoke of slavery, right? So when the Spanish came over, all they did was they beheaded the elites and they took over that institutional infrastructure, right? So slavery was in place. They were used to slavery. They were in charge of slavery. Well, when the English came over, the American Indians they were all egalitarian. They all had small tribes. They didn't have any of this hierarchical structure that the English could take over. So therefore, the English were forced to do it just by circumstances completely differently. And America evolved to be a much better nation simply because of this. So
doesn't make any sense.
Well, okay.
I don't follow.
I would check your history on that too.
I don't follow that historically.
The history that I'm laying out is from the book Why Nations Fail. It's by Darren Osamogla.
No. I understand the reason.
But what is these Spanish conquistadors?
He even goes in the book into the difference in the economy in the North where there never was slavery and in the South where there was slavery.
Well, you just jumped from.
Can I finish for a second here?
You just jumped 300 years in history.
That's how history works. Yes, it jumps forward in time.
Not when we're having a discussion about a specific thing.
There's two side by side. What is Mexico's economy like? It's getting better now, guaranteed. But
yeah, you just jumped to a completely different thing.
Oh, okay.
I think what Tim is trying to say is that you're looking at something that happened, 400 years ago, 500
so
years ago.
So are you guys. You're doing the exact same thing.
But then you're jumping forward 500 years into the future and drawing this causal relationship.
Because it's straight out of the book, Why Nations Fail. It's the same thing he does. The only thing I'm stripping out is all the evidence.
Plus the slavery argument from North could have
let Chris talk.
That is an actual legitimate argument from authority fallacy. It's true because this book says so.
Well, the book,
which you do a lot.
The
I don't
book
think
provides evidence. Okay, I'm not citing the evidence here because I don't have the book in front of me.
No, but you don't have to cite the evidence. You just said, "Well, I'm doing it because the book did it."
Let's talk about my actual argument. Was there any kind of hierarchical structural authority in the United States where the English landed?
Yes.
What was it?
They have chieftains.
But was it?
To say that they're completely egalitarian isn't true.
Chief is a leader.
They had a religious leader, a temple priest after the takeover.
So I'd also add that a good number of Native American tribes actually had a matriarchal system. They weren't completely egalitarian.
And can I just say that there were dozens, if not hundreds, of tribes? Like to lump them all in as like one society is a little bit.
They're all competing tribes, definitely. Yes,
and they weren't all conquered. A few of them actually just dissipated. They migrated and were absorbed by other tribes.
And millions, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions, were wiped out from diseases.
And they didn't also exist hundreds of years apart.
And the North
did have slavery from the Civil War
but
to the dock of the
I still want to know what that the reference was to the Spanish conquistadors and the founding of America and how America's prosperous because of that. I didn't follow that.
Yeah, I didn't
He
get
was
all
talking
the way-
about the
all way-
replacement of institutions with the among the Aztecs and other civilizations, which also wasn't necessarily what happened
in Mexico.
Yeah, like that, like
when
the Spanish came to Central America, I think is what's being referenced. That there was engagements between the Aztecs specifically and the Spanish,
Sure,
and
but
as well as numerous others. But there was like this big ass war between everybody, where they were actually making alliances with people going against the Aztecs or making.
Where are you getting this from? Are you
there were alliances where
a lot of the tribes
these
around the
saw the
Aztecs
conquistadors as.
Can I get a book citation?
They
I'm just curious.
Let Jim speak.
They actually saw the conquistadors as a god because of the weapons that they had, the armor that they had, the boats that they had. They had technology that was new to them, so they had no problem in surrendering power to them. And yes, they used this conquistadors so they could conquer other tribes, but they didn't conquer every tribe, every Aztec tribe, every Mayan tribe. We're talking about a very, very small coastal population of Aztecs. I mean, we're not talking about the Aztec station as a whole.
Where are you getting your Aztec history from? I'm just curious. Can I would like to read the book.
I honestly don't know where I got it from, to be honest with you. I just I can't tell you that with 100% certain.
I got my Aztec history from
maybe,
the book Why Nations Fail by James A. Robinson and Darren Oslamoglu. So if anyone wants to look it up, they're more than happy.
I know to do it. It's actually heavily debated, especially on its Mesoamerican bits in anthropological circles. And I know this because my brother currently studies Mesoamerican archaeology.
Tim, I think Tim had a point to pop in.
Well, I was. It's time. Sorry.
Okay. What I fail to see the distinction is, Adam. You know, even if the Native Americans in North America, if they didn't have that structure set in place, I still fail to see how not being able to implement slavery on Native Americans in America made America more successful society, because we did have slavery.
They were forced to develop a capitalistic system that we inherited to this day, because the people could not be. Why do you guys want to keep interrupting me?
Well, I was almost done with what I was saying.
Go ahead, man. You have the floor.
Okay, and I'll hand it over to you in just a second. But just to finish the thought process, I was in the middle of.
Sorry to interrupt.
If you are looking at the society where the Native Americans were replaced, and I was just living in Oklahoma, and there's a lot of tribes up there, and they have a lot of like historical museums that I visited and stuff, and they have like information on the Trail of Tears and on how they were completely displaced from their societies. They were largely wiped out by the millions from diseases that they didn't have immunities to. So it wasn't so much that like we came in and weren't able to set up slavery, so they thrived in our place. Like we replaced them. It's largely predominantly Western, European people that came and colonized America. So it was more a replacement than, their society thriving because they didn't have slavery. I don't see the connection there. And Adam, I'll throw it to you.
I am saying that there was the system of slavery and the system of non-slavery that had not yet been invented yet. And that the English were forced by circumstance to invent our capitalist system of non-slavery. And they were simply forced by circumstance because the Indians weren't organized in the same way that the Aztecs were. There wasn't already a population that was used to being slaves. The Indians weren't slaves. They couldn't enslave them. They couldn't enslave their own people, which the elites would try to do. But every time they tried to enslave their own people, they would run off and live with the Indians.
Well, we didn't enslave Indians to that extent, but there was certainly an importation of a massive slave trade from Africa.
Correct. Yes, and that came into being later after when they actually started the slave trade. And he separates this out in the book, Why Nations Fail, the difference between the South and the North And the North had much more innovation than the South, because the South, the slavery just, it blocks innovation. It completely blocks innovation. And he makes an argument there. And that's why when Ocean talks about how the society that implements slavery is going to do better than the society that doesn't, like, I just have all this
That's not what I
information.
said.
Must be why the Athenians and the Romans were such intellectual cesspools.
I'm pretty sure Ocean never said that.
Ocean, you said that there was a society that could do immoral things and succeed against a society that was doing.
I don't think Ocean said that.
Ocean, he can speak for himself.
No, it's a possibility that you could have that happen.
So are you on my position then? Because I'm the one saying that a society that does moral things will outcompete a society that does immoral things. And
I don't
you
think that's
seem to
the
be
standard.
taking. So okay, you seem to be taking the
I would
position
disagree with that.
that a society can do immoral things and outcompete a society.
So
that
what
does
I disagreed with is you're saying that I'm saying that the opposite is the rule because I'm not agreeing with you, and that's not what I'm saying either.
What are you saying then?
I'm saying that that the morality of the civilization is it might help their competitive value, but that you can still outcompete by being immoral.
Exactly.
So,
like
but
if
how is
it-
that-
it's
how is
it's
that
largely
different?
incidental.
How
I
is
think
that-
Jim has
How is that
something.
a different position?
Okay,
You're-
because if my morality told me that my tribe has to eat every baby that is born, my tribe's not going to last very long. But if my morality tells me that one, everybody has to have as many children as possible, and two, that we conquer other tribes and take them on as slaves and use them to build our economy, then I mean, that's an example of morality going one or two ways. But morality, there's no, unless you specify what aspect of morality that you're referring to, then morality as a whole has no sway on whether or not a civilization thrives or not.
I'm going to throw this both to Adam first and then to Ocean, but can we get kind of a basis for what you define as morality? Because it sounds to me like, Adam, you're talking about the well-being of a society.
No, I'm talking about the set of rules that a society structurally employs. The slavery example is perfect for what we're talking about here. You're saying that if the society has the rule, slavery is okay. I'm saying that that's immoral, and that a society that doesn't have that rule and will outcompete a society that does have that rule.
But
I'm looking at morality differently. That's a good observation, Thomas.
Well, hold on. Maybe more of a pertinent question, because you said it's immoral. What do you mean by moral?
But he just said that. He just defined it.
Yeah, Ocean, can I get your definition and where you guys see it?
I'm all over the place when it comes to morality and how to define it. But what I was making reference to, I was trying to make the reference to the same thing that he's talking about. But if you get into like how I'm looking at the conversation, it's more about the intuition of the people in the civilization. So.
Well, they have
a civilization where slavery is considered moral by that civilization. To argue that it's immoral requires additional kind of setup to that, which I think is going to result in discussing positions that Adam holds that it seems like he's holding to an objective moral system.
Do you think that
Do you think
that you can have a society that is, you can have gradients of morality? So you could have, if you look at like the Righteous Mind by like Jonathan Haidt, he looks at like different aspects of morality that people form a framework around. And so one of them might be, like sanctity, or one might be like, the freedom of, I forget what all the five are, but like I know Adam, you've at least read that. But if you have one society that values one over the rest and is like, we're all about, the well-being of the community, then, and another that's putting the well-being of the individual first. Like if you have different levels of morality, one might actually end in a system that has more well-being and less suffering, and it's a better moral framework. But the other one is still, they're trying to do a moral action, but they're doing it in a way that is to the detriment and the suffering of maybe another society, looting resources. Do you think that you can have a society that succeeds that is less moral, but it could succeed more if it's more moral? And that the morality really is just the definition of the success and well-being of all societies?
I'm gonna have to I would have to parse that out with you for like an hour, I think, in order to really like examine it.
Can I give a hypothetical?
My intuitive response is that I do think that you can have societies that can flourish by using paths that we would consider immoral. And I think that honestly, when you get into, say, like a collectivist or an individualist society, you wind up, if you have individualist values, you can get to a point where you hold moral systems that would be considered abhorrent by a collectivist. Like when you get all the way into the other end of a collectivist values, like you could have collectivism, like scale that up so high to the point where slavery seems okay. I think. I don't know if I would stand by that, but I think that slavery as a justification in a hard collectivist society to the point of like ants, you know what I mean? Like you could you could get to that where it's like, oh no, there's no moral issue with this whatsoever. It's for the good of the collective. And then you get into the individualistic aspect, which is no. There's those individuals that may be working for the collective, but they have individual rights. And that's when we get like our society, and I think everybody here holds individual values such to an extent that slavery is seen as immoral by everybody in here.
Right, but I mean, we also hold standards of morality that reflect or mirror society's general, consensus of morality. Because I mean, morality is something that develops. But I think what you're trying to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that morality doesn't have as much impact on society as society has an impact on morality.
Not quite. What I'm trying to say essentially is that if you can have a society that has values that oppose yours, yet still be a successful society if they can work it.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like the Vikings, for instance, they were seaworthy. They had the ability to build ships. They had the ability to fight. So they used that to their advantage. And after a time, what they deemed, what most people would deem to be immoral, they deemed to be moral, and it progressed their society.
I was trying to let it by the first time, but I'm gonna have to do it now. It's like that's like my area of history. The Vikings. this
bugging the shit out of you,
guys. So,
all right, go ahead.
The Vikings, which really Vikings were like a specific, like they were the raiders of their society. So you just had like several Norse civilizations that had raiders in them that were written about by the Britons as being Vikings. Never mind that everybody else in Europe was doing the same fucking thing the Vikings were doing. The Vikings just had better technology to do it. But the majority of how, quote unquote, the Vikings were getting their money and income was through trade, not through raiding. The raiding was kind of like is extra to.
It was a little bonus.
They were raiding people that they didn't see as valuable to trade with because you could take what they wanted easier than you could trade for it. And there were other civilizations that were like, well, we don't necessarily want to fight with these people, but we'll trade for it, which is what they were doing with Russia and the Middle East.
Is that moral or immoral?
Right.
What do you mean? So what was immoral? Moral or immoral?
Modern perspectives of morality on ancient people. It's just
it was competitive.
So you're saying it was moral?
it was competitive. So like
the rating was productive for them.
Well, I'm saying that it's immoral.
So is bank robbing.
It's immoral, and that it's more moral to trade. And I'm saying that is also goes with it being more economically feasible because of stealing someone's stuff is a one-time thing. If you trade with them, they continue to make the stuff and you continue to get it over and over again, which is a more efficient system.
So what the Vikings were doing, I'm saying the Vikings over and over, it's not quite the correct term, but what they were doing was raiding the people that they didn't see as worth trading with and trading with the people that they saw as worth trading with.
Right. But that's their perception. They don't necessarily know those people could have been very worth trading with.
Maybe.
See,
but instead, what they decided
difference doesn't make the Vikings ridiculously successful.
From continuous relationships, it was discovered by the Norse that Christians wouldn't trade with them anyway. So the best way to get whatever they wanted to do, whatever they wanted out of that civilization, was to attack them.
Okay.
Whereas Muslims would trade with them.
Can
Because
we
the
agree that
the Orthodox Christians, they would trade with them.
looking at this in hindsight from our current moral frameworks, we look at societies that pillage and plunder, we see that as it's violent, it's unnecessary economically, and we see it as immoral. But if in Steven Pinker's Better Angels of Our Nature, he looks at how morality has evolved over time and how societies have, as you start seeing this increase in literacy rates with both the printing press and then the Enlightenment, and then the widespread access, easy access to books and people writing even fictional stories, you suddenly start to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes and to think empathetically and to see things from their standpoint. That then goes on to, you have moral philosophers like John Rawls that comes up with the veil of ignorance that says, like, if you hypothetically run a thought experiment where you say slavery can be legal or it cannot be legal, and I have to choose what type of world to create, would I create a world with slavery in it if there's a 50-50 chance I could be a slave owner or a slave? And I'm hiding behind this veil where I can't see the outcome until after I make the choice. Would I make it with slavery or not? And you can kind of come up with a moral framework based off of well-being for everyone. And I think we all kind of see society through that lens, where we see it as, yeah, for those being invaded by the Vikings, no, it was horrible, it was horrific. And if I had to choose between a society that has raids and one that doesn't, and I could either be the Vikings or the people being slaughtered, I wouldn't create a society with raids. I think that's kind of where we're subliminally, subconsciously coming from, even if we're not vocalizing it.
Well, I think the veil of ignorance is an amazing thought experiment that more people should integrate into when they're considering their own morality.
But with that also, I mean, what you're talking about, though, you're talking about different norms of what morality are. The morality that you're talking about is what they call territorial morality, where it's just you and yourself, like you and the thing, you and what's around you. You're not concerned with how it affects other people else. But then tribal morality, on the other hand, they apply the standards of morality that's good for the whole on the individual, rather than the individual on the individual.
Well, but you can't just look at what's good for all of society in terms of sheer numbers.
It depends on if you're trying to progress society or the individual.
Well, no,
I understand that.
Let me give you an example. So it's like the difference between act utilitarianism and rule utilitarianism. You can say it is better for more people. There's maximum well-being for other people if I have a bunch of organs, but I'm healthy, and there's 5 other people who need 5 different organs that I'm a perfect match for. Well, why not just kill me on the spot and harvest my organs, and then 5 people get to live, and there's only 1 that dies instead of 5 that die and 1 that lives. But then you get into rule utilitarianism, which kind of pushes for maximum well-being for society in the most number of cases and the most amount of times. And it's like, I don't want to live in a society where I could just walk down the street and be pulled at random and have my organs harvested, or lose a family member that way or something. Like, there's a lot of like trauma and stress and stuff that comes about. Sure. And so you're like, I could, you try to kind of make morality more universal.
Well, and that's where democracy comes in, and democracy turns individual territorial morality standards into tribal standards by voting them in on a by a popularity contest, basically on what they consider to be the popular moral, the popular territorial moral.
So at least we don't have anyone in here that's saying that morality is objective and never changing.
Right.
I'm lying. No. Morality.
I wasn't sure if that's what Adam was holding.
It depends upon how you define morality. I mean, I have dealt with the objective morality people.
In my epistemology.
Well, no, it doesn't depend. Either morality is objective or it's subjective. You can't say it depends.
Or it's non-existent.
Well, it depends upon how you define morality.
Well, are you talking territorial?
Question is, how are you defining it, Adam?
Yeah, that's exactly
a set of rules that structure society. A set of rules that structure.
That's one definition. That's a tribal morality. Territorial morality is what you deem to be proper, not what's proper as a whole.
Tim has something you want to say.
Do you consider those rules objective?
I consider the
talking to Adam.
Oh, I'm sorry.
My bad.
That's the question I wanted him answered as well.
I did.
Gotcha.
What exactly are you asking? They're murder is illegal.
It's morality.
All right, hold on.
It's objective. It is objective.
I wanted to ask something about.
Wait, one second, because we're at the edge of getting here. So, I get so frustrated when it's like we're right at the edge of like clarification, and then there's somebody wants to change the subject, and
I hate it when I'm right at the end and somebody just walks in.
All right. So what I want to get with Adam here is. You've said a couple of times in the slavery conversation is, well, yeah, slavery is wrong in the conversation about the societal values. Do you hold that? Is that like going to be true in all cases, or is that going to be true in some societies, or is it just in societies where it's illegal? Like
slavery is both wrong and inefficient, and Thomas got this perfectly.
All right, so
he understands that morality is
let Adam finish.
He understands what he laid out is what my working thesis is, that morality and efficiency correlate. That because it's best for the most people in society, like it's a complete utilitarian morality, and it's the most efficient, that is what technically makes it moral. You see what I'm saying?
So you're looking at a utilitarian view of morality. And from that perspective, it would be objective on the basis of utility.
There's a chat.
Yes.
Right.
Hold on. I think we can simplify this a little bit. Adam, can you define? Hold on, Adam. Can you define morality?
I've defined it like 18 times.
No.
I know. He just did right there. That was the answer that he just gave was the answer that I was looking for. That he holds to a mostly objective, verifiable system of morality that has to do with the utility of civilization running. Now, you can get into some of the questions about what can make those systems subjective in changing environments, though. But that gets a little bit more shaky.
Ocean, aren't we really monkeying around with the list of rules all the time? In just that we do law, like the gay marriage thing, for instance, like the rule was no gay marriage. Now the rule is gay marriage is okay.
Laws and morals are different.
There's a really good
was
point
a change
that was made in the chat
reason why it was illegal before that was like a stability issue.
There's a really good point in the chat that correlates perfectly with this, and now it's by Red Venture, that objective morality doesn't mean never changing. And I think that's spot on, because you can have certain objectives that are solid. So you can say, like, our objective moral framework is, the maximum well-being for the most number of people. But depending on how society is laid out, that could be very different in different circumstances. So you could have, a circumstance where, the society holds one thing to be true, and in that certain framework, then certain actions bring about more well-being.
No. And
you're talking about universal morality, though.
Yeah. In an objective moral framework, that wouldn't change. It's an objective moral framework. So,
but we're talking about moral values versus
and universal
moral actions. Moral values versus moral
objectivity
actions.
means universal.
But you said it's an objective moral framework.
So, for example, the actions, like let's say that we live in a desert climate, right, where water is extremely scarce, and someone has a limited supply of water, and I go and I like scoop it up from their supply and I drink it. Well, technically, I'm stealing from them, and we can look at that as objectively bad. But then you could move to another society where there's an abundant amount of water everywhere, and nobody cares. And it's basically a free resource, and denying someone water when they're thirsty could be seen as immoral thing, and it's just open access to everyone, and it's two different scenarios, but you still have the objective moral framework at the top that is like, the maximum well-being for the most number of people, and it's the scenarios, like the actions aren't. Do you know what I'm saying?
I think we're using the word objective differently there.
Okay.
Yeah, objective could mean
Tim, I think when you're saying objective, you
measurable.
mean absolutist.
Well, measurable.
When I mean objective, I mean unchanging. It doesn't change from anybody else's perspective. So it seems like we're using the word differently in those situations.
I'm trying to tell you that would be absolute morality.
I mean objective in the same way that the sun is this distance from the earth, but that that could change.
Well, it does
It
change.
is changing, but I'm saying that we could measure it and all agree upon this is the distance from the sun and the earth, right? That's what I mean by objective.
Yeah, you're talking about objective reality there.
Yeah, exactly.
But when we're talking about morals, that you can't measure a moral. So when you say something is objectively moral, you mean it's the same no matter what.
Are the rules of basketball objective?
What?
Are the rules of basketball objective?
Yeah, when you apply the rules of basketball, sure.
Yeah, that's the way that I think
that was
morality.
circular.
Right. Well, it's a tautology. They are the way they are because we define them the way they are, which works as long
they're
as
not objective, like written into the universe, because we can play basketball by different rules.
Correct. Yes, and morality we can do the same way, and that's a discussion that we're having. We're saying what is the most efficient set of rules for society.
So you can say,
hold on. We're not saying what is the most efficient set of rules. We're saying, is there a best set of rules?
Right.
I think the cross-talking here is that Adam is a utilitarian, and which makes a lot of sense from other stuff that I'm familiar with him.
Aren't we all utilitarians? Aren't
No,
you?
no. A lot of people aren't.
Utilitarian in any stretch of the imagination.
What are you?
That's where you get. I don't necessarily know what my position is on morality. There's a lot of things that I intuit on it, but I used to be an anti-realist. I've since kind of revoked that position, and I'm looking around right now. Particularism is interesting to me, but I don't know enough about it to say that I hold it.
Yeah.
But if when you're saying you're a utilitarianist, or you're holding
I'm not going to cut out Tom's organs for the
yeah, I mean, that's where you get into
dying. Okay, I'm not that kind of utilitarian.
Yeah, right. That's you. When you get into utilitarian morality, you start to get into some questions like that.
No, but that's that's the difference between act and rule utilitarianism. Though there's a distinction.
What is it? I'm not as familiar with that. What's the distinction between those two?
So it's what I said a minute ago, where you can have people who adhere to act utilitarianism, where it's like, we're just gonna harvest people's organs for other people to live.
Type.
But then there's rule utilitarianism, which says no, we're not just looking for a maximum total well-being. We're looking for the best amount of well-being for the most people in the most amount of circumstances. Where then you say, I don't want to live in a world where I can be pulled from the street and have my organs harvested.
Yeah, okay, that's good.
Yeah, I think that sounds like Adam.
But
so it sounds like you don't know just from
your organs, Tim.
It sounds like
I'll give up a kidney or two.
Ocean, you don't know. It feels like I really know, but I just don't know the terminology, the philosophical terminology for what I believe.
Elucidate on your position. You don't have to name it.
Before he does, I just want to point out that I'm going to have 8 kids, so I can have 16 backup kidneys.
Oh, good. That is efficiency. And
don't know the
moral too.
Don't know the match.
That is efficient, kids. That's utilitarianism.
I had to go through 36 before I found a match.
Adam, to answer your question about my position, I've read enough about morality that I'm confused by it. So that's where I'm at. And I'm still looking into it, and I started reading Kant, and I got confused. So there's
everyone who reads Kant is confused.
Right. That's what I've found out is also that that's the natural state of reading Kant. Great, cool. At least I know I'm on the right track. But that being said, Kant does make some arguments for objective morality that I find interesting.
You're talking about categorical imperatives.
Yeah, I believe so. I'm still trying to wrap my head around it.
Can you ever really be sure?
The theists love Kant, man. That's their guy.
But
I was going to ask you to elaborate.
In utilitarianism. I've also just been interested in just like value ethics and particularism. So and error theory, they're all interesting to me. It's that morality. If I recall correctly, that it's about it's kind of morality as a situational thing. That it depends on particular situations.
That sounds like subjective morality.
It's related, but not the same thing. It's again, I know enough about it to be like, there's all these different things, but I don't know enough about any of them to really say that's what I am at any of them. So it's a exploration topic for me.
Particularism sounds vague enough to be dangerous.
Well, I mean, at the very least, you could
Probably.
say
The reason why I've gotten interested in it recently is a lot of the people that I know more about me than this are particularists, which is like, oh, okay, well, if these guys hold it, then there must be some value to it. So I'm reading up on it, but I don't know enough about it to say that I am one, or even enough about it to really explain it back to you.
I'm not even going to pretend to be a philosopher.
I want to ask what a particularist is.
Well, he just said.
Yeah, it has to do with more about particular situations and examining situational morality. But there's going to be some rules to it, but I'm not entirely clear on what they are. This is a subject that I've read enough on to be like, oh wait, no, I'm incredibly ignorant here. So,
yeah, I think
like asking me to defining a lot of terms that I don't have in front of me. I'd say Google it, honestly, because I'm not the best guy to like start getting into it and to that deep of a level.
No, but well, I've looked into this, and I mean that's generally what somebody who's building a subjective moral framework works off of.
I think in the understanding that you're putting forward, that particularism would be somewhat subjective.
Well, it would have
the thing that I ran into was that if you're going to like getting in between moral realism and moral anti-realism, that arguments for either one of those winds up being ad hoc, and they wind up kind of canceling each other out. So any like moral explanation is going to wind up being a just so story that's based on some unjustified axiom. So you wind up even like I'm having trouble getting into a moral, having an understanding of morality that doesn't rely on simple intuition somewhere, which is part of the reason why the subject is really interesting to me. That being said, when you get into the like objective subjective thing, the line blurs when you start looking at it from that perspective of like, how do you justify these things?
Right. Well, and that's my main problem with utilitarianism is that how do you justify these future or these actions that you take based on future predictions, but I mean, like you said before, there are, I believe you said it, that there are unknown consequences. So how can you be fully utilitarian knowing that there are unforeseen consequences?
That's when the pragmatism takes over.
Yeah.
So I just we've been going for a little while, and it's getting kind of late. So unless anyone has any final points or something, I'm just gonna have people plug their channels. But did anyone have any last sentence or anything that's just really bugging them to get out?
No, this was great. This was interesting.
You guys are awesome.
I'm curious.
Hey, thank you guys for a productive conversation. It has been awesome. I don't actually have. I think Steve says that Ocean has controls to end the chat.
Oh, I'll give them to you because I don't know how to fucking do that.
I don't have controls to end it. I just have.
I'm trying to give them to you.
Do we have control over anything, really?
But if you want to go from left to right, Adam, if you want to plug your.
Oh wait, I can only eject you.
Adam, if you want to plug your.
I have two channels. I have Think Club and I have Adam Friended, so you're welcome to check them out.
And Brian, his mic is muted. I think he left. Chris.
Brian and I run the Biblical History Skeptics channel.
Awesome. And if you can give us just a sentence of what that is.
Basically, we're reading through the Bible, going through, looking at it from a historical, critical, and trying to explain what scholars think about different passages and verses and the context and stuff. And then we also just drink a lot of liquor.
Oh, cool.
Best part.
Also the origin.
What do you say?
I don't know. What did you say, Brian?
Basically, the origins of these books, where they came from,
Yeah.
who wrote them, when they wrote them.
You're really low.
The Jack A just asked what Adam's channel was. He said Think Club and Adam Friended or Friended Forever. I'm not sure if you changed the name on it.
I did.
Adam Friended is what my notifications send me.
Okay. Dalek, you want to plug your?
I don't really do much, but it's Lucifer Almighty mostly.
Okay. Jim?
Oh, it's you.
I'm Jim Majors. I'm the CEO of Atheist Republic, atheistrepublic.com, Atheist Republic Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Yeah, everything.
Cool. And you guys have like the biggest Facebook atheist Facebook page.
Yeah. We have the largest online following period of non-believers. We're just about to hit 2.2 million.
Damn. Well, congratulations on your success.
Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, and we do weekly news on our YouTube channel, Atheist Republic. Myself and the founder Armin Navabi. Check us out.
Cool. Michael?
I have a channel. I don't have any videos on it yet. Tomorrow I will be doing a live stream with a friend of mine, Vibrantly Brantley. He's probably in the chat at 6.
He was in the
6
chat.
Eastern. Yeah.
Cool.
So I don't know if anyone will be able to find it though.
Well, make sure you guys check it out.
And I've seen Vibrantly, and he or she is hilarious.
Oh yeah, he's great.
Nice. Ocean?
I'm a polytheist, and I'm on Twitter as Ocean the Wizard. That's mostly where I'm active. And my YouTube channel is incoming, I guess, but it's also Ocean the Wizard.
Okay, cool. Steve is AFK, but obviously he is the host here. He has a show called The Non Sequitur Show with Kyle Curtis.
He's in the chat. What's he doing?
That's awesome.
The Great Debate Community and Steve McRae on YouTube.
He just gave up. He gave up.
Yeah, I think he was eating.
Yeah, Steve's eating.
It's like a
He's been eating for a while then.
He's like throwing commands in the chat. It's hilarious.
He said that I can plug him, so
I'm gonna drop out. Take care, everyone.
Take care.
Night,
Yeah, have a good night.
Bye.
Tim?
I don't have a channel, although now I think I need to start one up just so that way I have an excuse to be here with everybody else, because I feel like the odd one out.
You have a Twitter handle?
You don't need an excuse. You fit in fine.
My only Twitter handle is a fake one, and I use it to fuck with Kyle from the
Awesome.
Never been on Twitter.
So
Are you gonna plug that one, or are you gonna leave it a mystery?
Oh, if I give it up, then the fun's gone.
Oh, okay, yeah, then don't give it up.
And so I guess people try to figure out what it is.
Just watch Kyle's feed and try to find out who Tim is.
It's an Easter egg hunt.
So I've
be
been
great.
Thomas Westbrook. I have a show called Holy Kool-Aid. I make sciencey videos, and I debunk woo and paranormal crap and stuff. Laser focused, fun, funny pop culture references.
Yeah, it's a good show.
Pretty great.
Yeah, it's
Thanks.
awesome. You guys should check out his animated video series on the
I
Old
love
Testament.
those.
It's good stuff.
Should I make more?
When
animated
Spirit
Bible
Science
notes?
made a response to you,
Yeah, absolutely.
Wait,
He
Spirit
did?
Science made a response to me?
I
Did
think
they?
it was you.
I'm
I
not.
think it was
aware.
you.
Oh,
Might
I
have
want
been
to.
someone else.
I'm gonna have to check that out.
I haven't seen.
I usually, when someone makes a response to me, especially a bigger channel, I usually get like 1 million people that send it to me, and I haven't seen that. So,
One sec, I'll just look at. I think it was you.
well, while you're looking that up, I also have a podcast called the Here and How podcast, where we explore the past of different ideas, whether it's artificial intelligence or whether it's time travel or any big concept, and we look at the science and history of it, and then we explore the future and potential for different technological breakthroughs and developments. And it's a lot of fun. That's with Rationality Rules and Rachel Oates, who are 2 other YouTubers who make
Two great
content.
channels, actually. Rationality Rules is pretty good.
So I think now that we've all plugged our stuff, we're just going to kind of drop, and then it's just going to be a live stream for the rest of time, and Steve is going to continue eating his eternal dinner. It'll just be Steve McRae on here alone.
No way. I'm just gonna stay on here and just make Steve jokes.
Yeah, I would join you for that. Just
Two Steves walked into a bar.
Steve should not have given me the ability to shut it down, because I have no idea how to shut it down. I'm looking through the options right now. Just going like, what the fuck?
yeah.
am I doing?
So I tried to find that video from Spirit Science. I looked up Holy Kool-Aid Spirit Science response or Spirit Science response to Holy Kool-Aid. All that comes up is your videos.
Really? So I rank higher than Spirit Science when you search for Spirit Science.
That's awesome.
That's
pretty good.
Anyways, thank you guys for joining. This was fun. I'm going to be ending the stream. So,
Are you sure?
yeah.
And don't drink the Kool-Aid.
No, go drink it.
Depends on the Kool-Aid.
Oh yeah.
Hey, thanks so much, Steve, for having us
Drink
on.
it if it's holy.
Thanks for filling in, Thomas. Why did Jim have? Do you have something else to add, Jim, before I end, or?
Oh no, just go watch Non Sequitur show.
Two Steves walk into a bar.
We're gonna leave with that. You can come up with your own punchline.